I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome everyone to the Board of Commissioners meeting for Monday, November 13th, 2017. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to announce that we had an executive session immediately preceding this meeting, at which all sitting commissioners were present except for Jim Higgins, who is absent tonight. We discussed matters of personnel and litigation. I'd also like to announce again that there's a vacancy on this board for the 7th Ward. Last week, Monday, the 6th of November, we accepted formally the resignation of former Commissioner Phil R., creating a vacancy. So we are taking resumes and applications right now for residents of the 7th Ward who would be interested in serving as an interim commissioner until May, when there will be an election for that seat. So if you are interested and you live in the 7th Ward and you've lived there for at least a year and been registered to vote for at least a year there, then please send your resume to Bob Zinkowski, and he will get it to us, and we will arrange for an interview.
Oh, would you just review for the folks the schedule that we'll have on that?
So we are accepting now resumes. They're all going to our township manager. Hopefully at our next meeting, which is the 27th, we will have interviews from the people who have put their names forward. And actually those interviews are public. So we will maybe start our meeting a little bit early and hold all those interviews before the substance of our meeting begins. That night, I imagine we'll take some votes and see if we can get a majority to support one candidate. If we don't, we will wait a 30-day period from the day the resignation happens, which brings us to December 6th, if we can't find a candidate that we get a majority for. And then at that point, our vacancy board comes into effect. And what that is this board plus one person, and that one person is Tom Lowy, who was appointed a year ago. And if that all transpires, then at the next meeting, which is the 11th, we would have a vote with that vacancy board, which would be a 7-member board instead of a 6, and presumably we'd have a result from that vote. Okay? Next, the consent agenda. This is a part of the agenda where we move on several items at once because they don't merit discussion or debate. They're very perfunctory in nature, but we give a chance for anybody to pull from that agenda if you'd like one of these items discussed. Is there anybody on the board who would like to remove an item? Is there anybody from the public who would like to remove an item? All right, can I have a motion to pass our consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Next, we have a motion. Can I have somebody make a motion to authorize?
A motion that we authorize free parking for the WBA in downtown Wayne on Saturday after Thanksgiving and Saturdays in December.
And we have Chris Todd here, who is representing the WBA. Do you want to give a plug for this program?
Yes, sure. So we come to you guys every year. We appreciate it. The retailers in the town really do utilize it so we can compete with places that have free parking, like the mall and Barber and that sort of thing. So they do appreciate it very much. It's important. We actually advertise it now. We used to not. We do advertise it so people know to come and park for free. So we do appreciate it.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Well,
I'm going to stick around for that capital funding discussion.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Of course, I'm going to support this, but I also want to remind everyone that Saturday after Thanksgiving is Small Business Saturday, and we encourage everybody to come out and shop in our small shops. But not just that Saturday, all the holiday season. It is so much more pleasant to shop in Wayne than it is at the mall or the big box stores, and it helps the economy in our little town, and it helps us all as taxpayers as well. So, all right, there's been a motion and a second. There was no second?
Second.
Is there any commissioner comment, staff comment, public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Next, I'd like to announce that we have several vacancies on our boards and commissions. I'm just going to tick through them. At this point, we have one vacancy on the Board of Health, one vacancy on the Design Review Board that will be as of the first of the year, one vacancy on our Parks and Rec Board as of the first of the year, one vacancy on our Code Appeals Board as of the first of the year, one on the Environmental Advisory Council, one on the Planning Commission, and one on the Stormwater Advisory Committee. On our Shade Tree Commission, there is one current vacancy and one vacancy upon the resignation of Jake Abel, who was just elected as commissioner, so he will be stepping down at some point from that Shade Tree Commission. So if you are interested in serving on any of those boards or commissions, please send your resume or just a letter of interest or an email of interest to Bob Zinkowski, and we will bring you in for a very short, easy interview, and you can begin your service. Next, I'd like to move that we make 2 appointments tonight to the Shade Tree Commission. One is Virginia Hart to the position that is open immediately, and one is Joe Garzio, who we'd like to appoint to take Jake Abel's seat upon his resignation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any commissioner comment or staff comment? Any public comment? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Next, we have public participation.
Madam President, if I may, just before this,
Sure.
if it would be okay for item F to be removed from tonight's agenda, that one, if we can just have for the next meeting.
No problem. Item F is removed.
Thank you.
Okay, Jane? Hello, Jane.
Jane Galley, Rosemont. I just would like to thank both Bob Zinkowski and Bill Colarulo for their wonderful activity of looking over the iPad that was issued to a former commissioner, and that they had the wherewithal and the forethought to have it checked, so that this should also maybe become a permanent thing that you do on a regular basis. That would be my suggestion, because this is issued by taxpayers. It should not be abused. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Dan Sherry, Wayne. 2 points tonight. Commissioner Schaefer announced that there is now a vacancy in the 7th Ward due to the resignation of Commissioner R. It's actually a little bit incomplete. Commissioner R was the last elected president of the Board of Commissioners. He was president of the Board of Commissioners when he was arrested. And the reason why he was president of the Board of Commissioners when he was arrested was because on October 9th, 2017, this board blocked, via a 3-3 vote, an attempt to remove Commissioner R as president and install a new president in his place. There actually was not a nomination of any particular name. It was merely to have Commissioner R removed as president, not removed as commissioner, but removed as president, and a new president installed. And the 3 commissioners who blocked that attempt were John Nagel, who's here tonight, Elaine Paul Schaefer, who's here tonight, and Jim Higgins, who for some reason is not here tonight. I've been asking at every single televised meeting thereafter, including last week, whether or not Commissioner Nagel, Commissioner Schaefer, or Commissioner Higgins had heard on or prior to October 9, 2017, that Phil R. was being criminally investigated for child pornography. Here's what we know. We know that prior to October 9, 2017, the Township issued a press release stating that Phil R. was being criminally investigated. And that's of record. Not that somebody in Commissioner R's family is being criminally investigated, not that somebody on Commissioner R's block is being criminally investigated. No, Commissioner R is being criminally investigated. And what we also know is that subsequent to that press release, Nagel, Schaefer, Higgins blocked an attempt to have him removed as president. Now, I keep asking this question, and I keep getting blinked at by Nagel, Higgins, and Schaefer. Now, why this remains relevant is that in a couple of weeks, as Commissioner Schaefer announced, the Board of Commissioners is going to be voting on who's going to serve as interim commissioner for that ward. And as a result, it's important to know whether or not these individuals knew about Phil R. being criminally investigated for child pornography and nevertheless wanted to keep him on as president. I mean, that should be fairly disqualifying insofar as any person purporting to be an appropriate judge, a good judge of character. So I'm going to ask again, and I can't ask Higgins because he's not here tonight, but I'm going to ask you again, Commissioner Nagel, did you hear on or prior to October 9th, 2017, that Phil R. was being investigated for child pornography? Silence. Commissioner Schaefer, did you hear on or prior to October 9th, 2017, that Phil R. was being investigated for child pornography? Blink. Again, members of the community, if individuals up on this dais won't answer that very straightforward question, consider the thought process that must go into any, shall we say, more arguable issue that comes before this township. Second point, and I would just like to point out, congratulations, Commissioner Booker, and in the audience, Commissioner-elect Abel, and though I don't see her in the audience, Lisa Borowski, for your victories in the election. This was a close election, especially in the second ward where Commissioner Booker is. And this leads me to my question about Exhibit 6, which was part of a complaint filed against Commissioner Booker by, among other people, Doug McCone. I don't see Doug McCone in the audience, at least I didn't when I came in. Perhaps he's filled in behind me. No, don't see him. I've been wondering how this board has proceeded in terms of determining whether or not anybody leaked that document, Exhibit 6, to Mr. McCone. As I said back in October, it shouldn't take very long to conduct an investigation. Really, all that one truly should do is to call
Mr. Chair,
McCone
you're
on
coming
the-
up upon your 5 minutes. If you could wrap up, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
If you'd answer the question about Phil R., I'd appreciate it. I've been asking since October how Doug McCone got that document. And I've said, look, again, Mr. McCone doesn't really strike me as the cat burglar, cyber criminal type. Okay? Somehow that document ended up in his possession. It would take truly no more than 5 minutes for any attorney representing this township or the ethics board to call Doug McCone up on the phone and say, Mr. McCone, you attached Exhibit 6. How'd you get that document? But apparently, so far, at least in terms of anything public stated, that either hasn't been done or no information has been provided from Mr. McCone. And I would just urge this board to consider that every day there's not an answer to that question about how confidentiality was either negligently or carelessly or recklessly or intentionally breached, that continues to impact this township. Because you cannot have an ethics board without adherence to that strict confidentiality provision. And there are limited people on that ethics board. There's not too many. And there's not too many staff that advises the ethics board. And we know who signed the complaint and attached Exhibit 6. It was McCone and Jim Beaudry. So it surprises me that it is taking this long. It's not that this document went out to hundreds of people. It should be less than a dozen. And again, we know that McCone and Beaudry signed. So hopefully we'll hear an update and soon. Because if I was on the ethics board, I would be screaming from the highest rooftop in Radnor, we didn't leak this. If I was Doug McCone, I
Thank
would
you.
also be coming
Dan?
up with a solid excuse as to
Mr.
how
Chair,
this
can you
came
please
into
wrap up
my
now?
possession. I'll wrap up my comments. By the way, Mr. Nagel has said something. I didn't catch that, Ms. Schaefer? No, it's not worth me hearing? Okay. I would suggest that there should be people willing to come forward with that information, and please understand that this is a time-sensitive issue. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to give public comment?
We will hear on that in 30 days. That was very clear in the motion. The motion reflected what we said, so the next meeting, we expect a response in that.
Hello, Sarah.
Good evening, Sarah Pilling, representing the Skunk Hollow Community Garden. Seeing as last week was not televised, it was a small meeting. I wanted to announce once again that the Skunk Hollow Community Garden is accepting donations. It is tax deductible in order to buy food for 650 people who come to a soup kitchen in Prospect Park. They feed those 650 people 3 meals a day, 30 to 31 days a month. So far, people have been generous, and we have raised $500 for it. But I wanted to give people opportunity, should they care, to be part of us being thankful for what we have for others who are not. If you're so inclined, if you would write a check to the Skunk Hollow Community Garden and send it care of Susan Stern at 202 Midland Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment? Good evening, welcome.
Hi, how are you? Roy Rosen, 601 Glen Mary Road. So again, I'm here again on the issue of, it's H, the motion to authorize PLO. So my understanding was there was a delay last time. I had emailed a number of you actually on this issue, and I know it was delayed till tonight. I think this is a very simple issue. At least I haven't gotten any more information or better information, so I have to assume, based on no response to that what I put out there was correct. I believe it was. I think the issue came down to two things. One was traffic, and the other one was taxes. This is at least my understanding of the situation. And in representing this township, in representing the interests of the residents of this township, I believe that the Penn Medicine proposal came down to those two issues. My understanding was that there was an agreed upon and approved use of that land. There was a way that we could develop the offices, and I'm both a resident, as I said last time I was up here. I'm a resident who lives off of King of Prussia Road, so I care deeply about traffic. I'm a resident with kids in the schools. I care about traffic. I have kids in the high school. I care about traffic in that area. I also, like many of my neighbors, want Penn Medicine services in this neighborhood. And I want expanded Penn Medicine services in this neighborhood. The discussion today has been strange. It's almost like keeping Penn Medicine out is a good thing. It's like this is a payday loan or a check cashing business. It's very strange. Penn Medicine is the #1 health system in the region, one of the #1 top systems in the world. And people want to get those services without having to go downtown for them. So if you come back down to the issues of traffic and taxes, I'm not sure how much simpler it gets than the traffic analysis shows that the new proposal reduced traffic. I didn't hear any facts contradicting the reduction in traffic. There would be less traffic because of the new plan. So that's a good thing. We should at least go to advertise for more discussion just based on that alone. On taxes, I think it was unclear. I think some of the pushback might have helped, but it's clear now. Penn committed to paying taxes. So on the two issues of traffic and taxes, traffic gets better, taxes get better. So we should be sitting here saying, absolutely, we want Penn Medicine in this community. By saying, no, we're not going to bring this to public debate, or we're not going to go forward with this discussion, that seems to violate the whole idea of representing the community. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand the facts that would say there's a third-party traffic analysis, that traffic is better under the new plan. So I just want to encourage the board strongly. I know that there's been confusion. I know that there has been some different facts bandied about, but the bottom line is these are services that the community wants. It's the top health system in the region, one of the top in the world. We want them here. We don't want them chasing around. They've been here for 20 years. They've paid taxes for 20 years. Traffic will be reduced under this plan. It's not a viable assumption to go off of vacancy. It won't be vacant forever. Spreading traffic across the day, the way it's been proposed, and mixed use is the way it's been proposed, is a better plan for Radnor. And with the commitment only under the new plan to pay taxes, that is the best thing for Radnor Township. So I do hope that people get the facts straight. There's been a lot of misleading information. The facts are clear. This is a better thing for Radnor Township. And I hope the board supports that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment? Good evening, welcome.
Hi, Susan Majensky, 203 Tower Road in Villanova. I also wanted to speak out in support of the plan for Penn Medicine at Radnor. as a resident of the township, and I also have a high schooler who's a new driver, so I'm also very concerned about the traffic plan. I know traffic will come in with use of the land, but right now there is no use of the land. And I think that the plan from Penn Medicine is a good plan, again, to spread that traffic out during the day. I also think it's a very good idea for the residents of our area to have a second medical giant in this area. We have a medical giant in mainline health system, and they give quality care to our people. But at this point, Penn Medicine has a smaller presence, and I think its presence should be larger. It's a quality institution. It has a good reputation, qualified physicians, qualified support staff. But right now, residents have to go downtown for most of the services. I'd like to see our residents in this area have a choice of where they want to go for all of their services. And by approving this plan, we'd also give the residents that choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a public comment at this point? All right.
I have one thing. I was told that we actually, on our meeting on November 6th, that we were not going to have any vote, but we did have a vote. Did we have a vote on November 6th?
I think the only one was to accept.
It was
yeah,
voting.
we accepted the resignation. That's
All
it.
right, can we redo that so that we can all vote on that?
No, we don't need to do that. It's already done. Is there anything else?
Why wouldn't we want to do that? As a matter of fact, I made a point of not wanting to have that meeting on November 6th. You made a commitment that there would be no votes, but yet you took a vote. And now you're not giving the two of us who are not there
Rich,
an
would you like
opportunity.
to- would you like to put on
Make a
record
motion,
that-
and I'll
Would
second
you like
it.
to put
All
on
right,
record that you would vote that way?
I would move that we
Just
take
move that
the
we
vote,
accept-
that we accept the resignation of Phil R. under this full board.
Second.
Is there any commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 5-0. 4-0 with one abstention. All right, moving along. Finance and Audit was Commissioner R's committee, so I will handle this. And we have a discussion of our 2018 budget, capital funding, community organization funding, and Radnor Fire Company funding. At our November 6th meeting, we had a very fine and thorough presentation about our capital funding needs and how we might meet them. Do you want to give a little recap of that, or does anybody on this board want to hear a recap of that?
I would appreciate that, yes.
Sure. That's where we'll start then. Just for those who either were not able to attend or haven't come across the website or the Township's TV channel, the last Monday's meeting was recorded, and it is up on the Township's YouTube page with all of our other public meetings. It's also airing on the Township's channel that has all of our other public meetings. So it is available out there for folks who want to go back and watch that. In addition, as we discussed last Monday, I did the presentation, or I did a voiceover of the presentation, and that was published to the 2018 budget page on our website. So if you don't want the full meeting, if you just want the presentation piece, there's a link to a video on the budget page of the website that you can go, I think it's like 25 minutes. Probably the most exciting 25 minutes you'll have all week. So I would urge everyone who's interested to go check that out. But where we started last week, and Ian, if we could switch over to my laptop, we'll go from there. Again, this is the presentation. I won't go step by step as I did last week. But the way the capital budget is set up is it's incorporated within the township manager's recommended budget, beginning on page 158. Within the capital plan, we've got each of our funding sources along with the projects that they fund identified from various levels of detail. So we have a sources and uses summary, which is the highest level of review. That has all of the roll-up numbers that tells us how much funding we need in order to fund all of the projects that are identified within the capital plan. The plan itself is broken down into the different categories. We have the department vehicles and equipment, fire company contributions for their capital. We have our IT. Those three categories make up the portion of the plan that is funded with current resources. And for that part of the plan, there are sufficient revenues to pay for the capital replacement needs in those three categories. Then for the capital projects part of it, the longer term assets like our roads, our bridges, sidewalks, facilities, signals, park improvements that are funded through general resources, that's where we have a funding gap. And then we also have the sanitary sewer and stormwater groups that have dedicated revenues that would pay for those improvements, so long as the revenue is sufficient to fund the capital projects. So again, within the capital plan, you can go down into different levels of detail. For each of those categories, we have a table that lists the project name along with 5 years of forecasted expenses. So you can at least get a name of all the projects that are identified within the plan. And then from there, we have a one-page summary on each project that goes into a little bit more detail and provides some greater context on why the project has been identified in the plan as a need. And at the bottom of that one-page summary is also a funding plan, whether it's that particular project is using grants or other financing means other than general resources that's identified there as well. Then I wanted to note also, or I did note last week and within this presentation, that the park improvement plan as well as the stormwater plan has a little bit different look, a little bit different layout. And those layouts have been developed over time because each of those plans have citizen residents groups that are participating in the process. They meet separate of the Board of Commissioners. They review these projects, and those recommendations get built into those two tables. So the review of the current funding situation talks about the pay-as-you-go portion, as I touched on a moment ago. These are the departmental vehicles, our moving fleet, the departmental equipment that Public Works, for the most part, is Public Works and police use in their everyday service delivery. Those assets tend to be shorter life vehicles that useful lives are used up within 3, 5, 7 years. So we're using current resources to pay for those. That was a switch that the board decided a number of years ago that was recommended through GFOA best practice as well as in the CBFAC report and then subsequent CARFAC and administration conversations that we've had during meetings just like this over the years, that we should be matching the sources that are paying for those assets with the life of those assets. And move away from the practice of using long-term bond funds to pay for short-term assets. So as a township, we've been successful at separating this group out from the rest and having sufficient revenues to fund it, to fund the replacement of these items. And that's been the case for the better part of the last 5 years. And for 2018 again, and actually if you had a chance to look at the forecast section of the 2018 Township Manager's recommended budget, it looks like, at least over the forecast period, the next 5 years, that revenues will be sufficient to fund this portion of the plan as well. So where we talk about having a funding gap is in the longer term assets. Again, those are being roads, bridges, signals, sidewalks, facility improvements, park improvements, and the like. The township through the 90s and 2000s, the township funded these capital items with long-term bonds. There were a multitude of issuances through those 2 decades at various points in time. I'm guessing that a bond issue was done as needed. But those were the resources used then to fund the capital program. That practice was stopped in 2007, and other than the bonds issued, we had the voted open space bonds in 14, and then we had the library, parks, and trail bonds that were adopted in late 15 and issued in early 16 that had with it a millage adjustment. Other than that, there haven't been any other bond issues to fund this portion of the capital program. Instead, the townships benefited from unanticipated revenues in both the business taxes and permitting activity that has funded that portion of our plan. Looking into the long term, it's difficult, as we've talked about in each of the past years. It's difficult to sit here tonight or at any point during these budget discussions with any reasonable assurance that we can count on unanticipated revenues. It's hard to plan and fund then this portion of the capital plan with just those sources. So what we had talked about last week was the idea of a funding plan that would include borrowing smaller increments of dollars, roughly every 3 years or as needed. We built a forecast based on 3 years. We forecasted it out through 2050 of issuing roughly 3.5 million. These would be 20-year bonds at fixed interest rates. After the cost of issuance, that would result in an annual capital of about 1.1 million per year to fund this portion of the plan. The graph on the right shows what the fund balance would be within the capital plan, and the reason why it's sawtooth like that is every 3rd year it's being injected with new borrowings. Then those dollars are spent down over the next 3 years and then reissued and so on. The solid orange line represents the 1.1 million that we'd have available per year under that plan. The reason why we looked at 3.5 million is because at today's interest rates, anyway, the debt service, the annual debt expense paying down 3.5 million fits within the current amortization schedule. Let me jump to the graph. It's a little easier to show, and I can jump back to these. So the current debt schedule for the township, as it exists today, is roughly $3.5 million that the general fund is paying for debt service. And there are built-in drop-downs in annual expense as we pay down the township's current debt load. The idea of, or why the 3.5 million fit is that when we add, over the graph on the right, when we add the debt service to pay down the different $3.5 million issuances over the forecast period here, the orange line represents the new debt service expense to the township. And as you can see, up through the early 2030s, the total debt service for the general fund remains basically where it's at today. And that was the idea of we can generate additional funds to pay for this portion of the capital plan without adding expense to the general fund. We would be foregoing the savings that we would otherwise see if we did not fund it this way. But at a minimum, at least for the foreseeable future, we would not be adding expense to the general fund, which is, again, why we chose 3.5 million. There is a period beyond there, beyond the early 2030s, where it does ramp up a little bit. But as we talked about last Monday, one of the benefits of this proposal is that every 3 years, the board gets to revisit it. And if there's ever a point in time where additional funds are available, The plan could be scaled back, it could be changed. There's nothing binding the board to make those $3.5 million issuances in the future. So if there are additional revenues or other sources of funds at those times or in the future that could fund this program, the borrowings would not be necessary. And then the township's overall debt service would start dropping again as it is now. So that is a 10-minute version of last week's 20-minute or 2-hour discussion. The one last piece to this that I wanted to touch on is that when we were here a year ago talking about the 17 capital plan, the $1.1 million generated by these small issuances at the time looked like it would be sufficient to fund this portion of the plan. A year later, as we sit here today with added projects, the $1.1 million by itself probably wouldn't be enough if every project in the plan were adopted as proposed. So either additional general fund resources will be needed to fund the difference, or projects within the plan need to be evaluated and prioritized differently to either be, with some of the projects being pushed out to the later years, or some combination of those two alternatives. So I did want to make that point. The one other point that I did not make last Monday that I should have is, again, referring back to the forecast as it's included in the township manager's recommended budget. The next 5 years with normal revenue growth, it appears that normal revenue growth will be sufficient to cover the forecasted expenses over that time period. So there may be additional general fund dollars that could be allocated to any one of the priorities in the policy, capital being one of them, long-term liabilities in pension and OPEB being the other two. But I didn't point that out last week, and I should have, that the forecast is part of this. And it looks like without any reduction in revenues, if everything behaves as it has for from the past 5 years, that there could be additional dollars from the general fund to help fund the gap between the borrowings and what the plan would require if all the projects were approved.
So can you clarify exactly this year, 2018, what the shortfall is on the long-term projects, capital projects?
Yeah, so for 2018, that's this first column here. I know the numbers are a little bit small, but we would be coming up roughly $732,000 short.
And that's without any Willows spending.
That's that was the other point that we talked about last week, is that the Willows was not included in the township manager's recommended budget. Again, that was done so in response to some of the concerns raised in prior years that once those recommendations are built into the budget document itself, it becomes harder for those discussions to be changed or altered. So we intentionally kept those out of this analysis, knowing that those discussions are concurrently going on.
Okay, and
This thing's jumping
do you
based on
have a
something.
number for the 2016 surplus that is available?
I
from
do.
the CAFR?
It's in the ballpark of 1.5 to 1.6 million.
Okay, and
My concern there, though, is that the general, because we had those emergency sewer breaks this year, the general fund is having to transfer roughly $3.5 million to the sewer fund to pay for those projects. So that is going to chew up all of the excess fund balance, and that's going to bring the general fund balance down to roughly where, maybe even a little bit below the policy level.
The 25% policy level or the 15% policy level?
25.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to be close. I don't think it'll get below the 15%, but and that would be for 17, though. So basically what I'm saying is that we had to use the 2016 excess to fund the sanitary sewer shortfall this year,
Okay.
and then some.
I thought we're going to raise revenue on that from spreading that across the fees for sewer rental.
Well, we haven't had that discussion specifically. That's on the list of items to be reviewed before the final budget gets.
Well, I know when we talked about it initially in the summertime, we said that that's where that would, I mean, that's where those fees will ultimately be paid for, will ultimately pay for the sewer work. So it's a short-term revenue use for projects that over the long term will be part of the sewer fees.
Yes, and that's a really good point. And to build on that, if the board wanted to borrow additional funds to do sanitary or storm projects, that could happen on top of, if this plan were to be adopted, that could be, sorry, the slideshow has a mind of its own and wants to just keep right on going. So we could add additional borrowings to the $3.5 million to do sanitary or storm projects. The funding for those pieces of the bond issuance would come from those fees. And that could include reimbursing the general fund for the money it had to fund this year for the breaks. We would, if the board was interested in borrowing for sanitary projects in general, the board could consider adding $3.5 million to that borrowing to repay the general fund, and that could happen immediately. That as soon as the proceeds are deposited, the general fund could be repaid.
I guess I wasn't suggesting that. What I was suggesting is that it's really more of a pay-as-you-go. The sanitary sewer emergency funding, that work had to be done. It was done. Short term, the revenue came from the excess fund balance, and that amount would be replenished through fees over a period of time. I wasn't suggesting increasing spending or increasing borrowing on sanitary or storm sewer, because we have a storm sewer source of revenue, and we also have a sewer fee for these types of projects. So I was thinking to keep them separate. But again, the issue is, you said we needed to use fund balance to pay for the emergency sewer repairs. So again, that should come from sewer fees ultimately.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. What it'll boil down to is what the board's tolerance for fee adjustment is on just how quickly that money gets reimbursed
Right,
back to the general fund.
because that's a sizable increase in the fee. That's not a modest increase to a project of that size does not modestly affect the fee.
If we were going to use cash and not any kind of financing, I don't have the math memorized, but it would be a very sizable
And then
increase.
my recollection of the summer discussion was that the intent of raising the fee was not to pay back the one-time costs we had this year, but to come up with a program to prevent future one-time costs. So, so the bottom line is there are big gaps of money, not little gaps that get resolved with erasing your number 2 pencil and putting in a new number. Big gaps, multi-million-dollar decisions that we're going to have to make in the next 4 weeks.
Well, the one other point that we talked about last week with regard to timing, and this is moving away from the sanitary sewer, this is going back to the general piece of this, is that if the board is resolute or has come to comes to some decision on not adjusting millage rates for 2018, then we can continue the capital discussion beyond the next couple of weeks. We don't have to try to cram it in. The urgency tied to these discussions is that The board gets one opportunity each year to adjust millage rates. So if adjusting millage rates to fund the general portion of the capital is not going, if there's going to be no adjustment in millage rates, then we don't have to have a decision. We can always amend the capital plan at any point in time if once resources are identified to pay for it. So if the board decides to borrow funds, say in winter or spring of 18, the plan can be modified then to match what is borrowed for.
Right, but I think it would be inappropriate for us to adopt a budget with an expense side that we don't have a plan for the revenues for.
Well, those expenses would be pulled out of what it is you adopt as part of the budget. So
Right.
that portion of the plan would be zeroed out. There would be no appropriations included.
Yeah, so we'd still have to go through the capital budget
Yep.
and take out what we are not matching with revenues, and then put them back in if we were going to do a bond.
Yes, once the funding
Right,
source is
so,
identified.
Okay. Well, so tonight we need to decide the capital plan that has been presented to us, the items in the 2018, we have a shortfall. So we have a few choices. We can take some of those items out and not do anything in terms of revenue. We can leave all of the items in and commit to raise the revenue for them. I thought we would have an option to apply surplus, but I don't see that that's an option anymore.
And an infinite number of options between the two that you just outlined. Those are the three choices. Because essentially it's
Right, but we need to make a decision. We need to tell them what to put in the budget.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I'm not making that decision tonight. So I'll make it, we can come up with a schedule as to when you need it, but I'm not in a position to make it tonight. And if there's a decision tonight, my decision will be there's no more money. So I need more time to look at these. If the decision has to come tonight, my decision would be no borrowing, no more revenue. So where I am now with this, open to it. We've got some big gaps that we have to close. We have probably 2 to 3 weeks to start funneling it, paralleling it, getting it closer. So I'm going to use that. I have some reservations. One of my reservations is that this is the kind of discussion that I thought we should have had in 13. I think we did this backwards. We borrowed what to me was discretionary money. We borrowed money for our dross and we borrowed money for trails. These were discretionary projects. Now what we're presented with is the ramifications of doing your discretionary borrowing before your more essential borrowing. So for better or for worse, we can't undo that, but I can tell you that I'm not in a position tonight to define where I believe the threshold is. Second, I always have concerns with this idea of level funding of like, we'll just give you a revenue source and then we'll pick the projects each year that match the revenue source. One of the concerns is that if we have level funding, we'll never go backwards. It'll always be spent for something. And then the second concern with that is this idea of diversion, which we've done twice. We borrowed money in 15, and we have twice diverted the money that we borrowed in 15 for different projects. To me, that's an indication that that we didn't do the full diligence. It's not the staff's fault. It's the Board of Commissioners' fault, in my opinion. So again, I have that reservation that if we borrow money and it just becomes that pot of money that we use every year, it becomes prone to diversion. 3, we've got some big ticket items. Your numbers don't include MS4, correct? Meaning,
Well, the understanding is that any MS4 costs would come out of the stormwater fund
Right.
and
But-
paid for by the fee.
but the board did not, we tried to make that happen, and the board said otherwise. So as of the board's direction to the staff is you have this budget that we approved a year ago, and that budget becomes the anchor unless we change it. That means you have to come up with an additional $6 million in addition to the amount that we either have to use the amount that's in the fund or come up with $6 million more. So I'm going to continue to press that those fees must be used to pay for the MS4 obligation. We also have the Willows money, which isn't in there, which is going to be about $1.4 million, assuming that if we go with that $1.7 million option where we have $300,000 in a fund dedicated to this that isn't additional money that we need. We would need around $1.4 million.
At the end of the day, yes, as we've learned with the $1 million donation, in all likelihood, that's going to end up being a reimbursement back. So we'll need additional funds up front, and then as the donation comes in, it'll draw down on whatever we use to finance it.
And then the last one is the sanitary sewer. If we proceed with what there seemed to be conceptual agreement on in the summer, that there is money in this budget to increase our capability to do preemptive projects to prevent the sort of thing that we had this summer, then you're probably talking millions of dollars more in capital for that across a 5-year plan. So you're talking about a gap of 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, $12 million, $10 million that has to be closed in 5 weeks, 4 weeks. I guess we're turning. Sorry, Bill. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just saying it's a big number.
It doesn't sound like it's that much, Bill. Is what you seem reticent to agree with that.
No, I mean, trying to keep up with the math.
$6 million for MS4, $1.4 million for Willows.
Well, wait. $6 million for MS4. What about the $4 million that's in the fund right now?
Well, but the board directed the staff to not do that. We can revisit that, and I'm going to make that same argument. But we made the determination not to do that.
Well, we didn't say it was zero. We just said that your formula of the first money goes towards MS4.
Yeah,
they didn't agree to that, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't say no money from it.
Okay,
though.
but there's a budget for stormwater, and it projects out 5 years, and that money is not used to satisfy the MS4 obligation. So the $6 million plus or minus is a new obligation in addition to the money that we budgeted at our last stormwater budget. So we have to redirect that. That money is available. It just has to be redirected from the previous commitments.
Well, it's still an estimate. The MS4 is still an estimate, and the timing of it is not nearly as clear either. So it's less concrete than that, I think.
Well, it's a 5-year, I mean, it has to be done in 5 years. So it is an estimate, but it has to be done in 5 years. So I guess, yeah, we don't have to solve it tonight. I'm just saying these are big numbers, and we've got to close a gap that has big numbers. This isn't a gentle thing that we're going to massage into place.
Well, I agree. I just would like to focus on the 2018 gap instead of the 5-year gap. So when we say $6 million, you're throwing in there a 5-year number for MS4, and there is money in the fund right now. So I don't
would be much less than $6 million.
Right. So that's what my point is.
Good point.
Bill, sewers are typically capital dollars. To me, it seems totally appropriate, and also because the theory is the users of the sewers are the ones that pay for that. So I'd like to see some numbers as to what kind of increase we'd be looking at if we were to borrow the money to refund the general fund and to have something that we can put in there moving forward. So not just the cost of the bond to refund, but the cost of a bond to build capital. So I'd like you to get back to me with some numbers on that.
Are you talking about a percentage increase, John? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Based on the fee?
John, your idea there is to use the borrow money and then use the sewer fee to simply pay the debt service.
Right. So your increase in the sewer fee would be for debt service on a 20-year borrowing for the sewer fund.
Which is appropriate for capital expenditure.
And that would keep it out of the general fund. But I guess there is the reimbursement of the general fund is still that's where that money would go from a borrowing for the sewer fund. And I know that, Bill, you did put together some estimates of that in the summertime. You were talking about an estimate of that. But that is appropriate to borrow money for that emergency repair in the sewer fund and pay for it through debt service increase, an increase in the rental fees to cover debt service in the sewer fund, the sewer fee.
Yeah, the forecast that we had talked about in August assumed that we used cash to do all those projects. So
that's much higher than what it would actually be, yeah.
It was kind of worst case scenario.
If we did that, then we'd be reimbursing the general fund we'd get back the surplus money from the 2016 surplus money, which we could put towards 18 expenses.
Yeah, so that's the benefit of reimbursing the general fund sooner rather than later, as those funds then become available to fund the general portion of the rest of the capital plan.
The capital program. Well, I will say I went through the proposed spending on the capital 2018 capital expenses pretty carefully, and there's not much there that we don't need to do. In my opinion, they're necessary expenses. And the trimming that I did identify was so negligible, they were small items anyway, they wouldn't make a difference. So in my opinion, we are in a position where we need to find a way to cover those for 2018. And the jury is still out for me as to whether this bonding is a good idea, the small level bonding. Certainly, if we're going to do that small level consistent bonding, it makes me less excited about doing it on the sanitary side, the sewer side. One or the other. Free up the capital on the general fund and borrow for the sanitary, or vice versa. And if we did borrow for the sanitary, I would want to see us use that surplus for capital. And lastly, I would like to see us put the numbers for the willows in this budget, because at this point, we need to have a discussion and see if we have the votes for this spending to happen. If it's going to happen, it has to be in this budget.
So I'd say just make a motion to have that become the baseline. And then, so if it carries the day, it carries the day.
Well, before that, the number that we were given, the shortfall, is 1.7 million. We identified several meetings ago, I think about 1.1 million.
No, I think we agreed on $700,000 plus or minus.
$700,000. That was the shortfall. The shortfall was 700.
No, we agreed on $700,000 worth of revenue that this is my recollection, that there was a consensus that would become part of the baseline.
Okay, let me go through the numbers with you. So, and if you disagree with them, then we had a misunderstanding. The first was Fund 18, Willow's allocation balance, $342,820. That's money that's in our budget for the Willows. The second was Fund 18, reallocation of the ERP money, $157,130. The third was Fund 23, the park impact fee, $325,000. And the fourth was using the proceeds from the scout sale, $190,958. And I don't have the math in front of me, but that's 1-something million. It's a little over $1 million. And those, from the discussion we had,
Looks like it's $1,016,000, right?
$1,016,000.
Which leaves us with 800,000 and some change left.
So,
I don't remember so whatever it was, but I don't remember the 190 for the scout. My recollection, it was those first three is what we agreed upon. And my recollection of the other item that we discussed was the pension money. And what we sort of said was, don't take money that could go to something else and divert it to this. Instead, take money that is intended to go to the park. So my recollection is that we came up with the number of around 750.
So minus what is that number minus? So are you against using the Boy Scout proceeds? Is that what you're saying?
No, I've never been against any amount of money for this. What I'm saying is it has to be one and provided in the budgeting process as part of the trade-off. So what we said is there is a baseline. We gave them instruction that the baseline would be something on the order of $750,000. And after that, it becomes a political decision for us that involves these sort of trade-offs.
The number that we put in the budget for 2018 depends on the number that we reallocate. So we need to do that. We need to decide how much we are taking from these other sources before we can decide what number we're going to plug in the 2018
Okay, and where we're having a disconnect is you see it as a one-time thing. I see it as a process. So I see it as they give us a document, which is a piece of paper that has the numbers, and then we have to decide, we have to move money around, pick and choose, and decide how we want to spend it. What I don't want to do is say, put all this money in, and it just becomes the anchor. Given that we have all of these other expense items, we can't commit to that project unless we do it within the context of the other projects.
Okay, let me start again. What I'm suggesting we do is decide whether we want to reallocate these funds that are not part of our capital discussion at this point tonight. If we agree, which we had agreed at one point to do that, then we can put a number in the capital budget and decide whether that's an appropriate number or not as we move forward. If it's $700,000, if it's $1 million, but putting something in under the Willows column, and as we move forward, if we decide the other expenses are too much and we can't spend that much on the Willows, we either eliminate it or we put half of it in and ask them to fundraise for the rest. We can adjust that number in the capital budget as we move forward.
Okay, and I think that number should be $724,000. So that's the number that I believe we agreed to before. So that means that the budget that they present to us will have that as the anchor. And then what we have to do is come up with the additional $700,000 or choose not to have the project or choose to scale the project back.
Well, wouldn't that be 1.1 extra?
Well, I'm assuming that there's yeah, it would be 1.1 extra that we'd have to provide.
Is all the spending going to be 18?
No.
For
For the
Willows? No, I don't think so. I think it was 18 was going to be the final design,
Right.
where they would determine what the final construction numbers are, and then the construction would be 19 in all likelihood.
But what we have to do is we have to come up with, so this is a multi-year project. It's going to involve a sizable amount of money spent in 18, and then a sizable amount of money budgeted in 19, 20, 21. So we then have to, we can't commit to a $5 million project or a $2.7 million project and do all of that funding 3 or 4 years in the future. If we're going to take this money, it goes into the fund, like this $700,000 would go into the fund, and then we would decide, there'd be another line of money going in and another line coming out. But we need the 5-year or the 3-year projection on that before we commit to it.
This $700,000 that you keep referring to, what is that? Is that this reallocated money or new money that we would
It's the
be-
first three
It's
items that
three
you
items there.
identified.
Yeah. Fund 18, 18, and 21. That's where he's getting that.
Yes.
Right. And that, you are saying, that is something that we are reallocating separately than what we would put in the capital budget? Or you think
No, I'm
those are
saying
the
that
only
that goes.
dollars?
No, not at all. I'm saying that goes into the capital fund. They present us that's the anchor. So the next budget that they present, it would show that money populating the Willows Fund.
Okay,
And-
so are you going to take the correlating revenues and put them into the revenue side of the capital budget?
Well, only if you all decide to come up with the extra 1.1 million. That part is unfunded. Right now, there's a gap of in excess of $1 million for that Willows project. And that gap has to be closed, and it has to be closed within the context of all those other ones. So that's what we have to do. We have to close that gap or choose not to build that project.
Okay.
What I don't want is we decide on that project outside of the context of the other projects.
Well, we could decide on that project at a 1.8 number and only put your 750 number in for 2018 and leave the rest to be funded by revenues TBD.
Yes,
Will
that
they
can
go
be.
in the 5-year capital plan?
That can, there is an element of that will happen. What I don't want to do then, though, is simply, next year this project would, let's say it's a $2.7 million project. Next year it might only need $250,000. It would be a mistake to only put $250,000 in the Willows Fund, knowing that we have a $2.7 million expense that's going to present itself over 3 years. We need to put a sizable amount of money in that in 18 if we decide that it's a priority for us in years going forward.
One question for staff over here, back to the sewer revenue bonds. So if we were going to fund these past sewer expenditures with bonds, they would be issued as part of the Radnor Marple Haverford Sewer Authority, or would they be under the general bonds issued by the township?
They would be Radnor Township general obligation bonds. So
Well, can't the sewer authority issue bonds?
we can reach out and ask them to.
They can.
They don't have any authority in Radnor, though.
Well, they can issue bonds.
But
I'm
they
not
would-
sure they could do so at a cheaper rate than Radnor could by itself, backed by our
Maybe not,
credit.
but it would be off of our books, though. It would be their debt. It would be the sewer authority's debt, and it would not be Radnor. So you're going to load up, if you issue sewer bonds under Radnor, you're going to be loading up and taking away our debt capacity to the extent. It's better if they do it.
Rich, they wouldn't do that to improve Radnor's system. I mean, they're a pass.
Well, it's not a Radnor system, it's a repair, right?
Yeah, but it's in Radnor's, part of the system that flows into RHM is owned by Radnor. RHM is not going to fund repairs in any of the member, municipalities. They have a certain amount of pipe that they own that the members flow into. They could borrow to fix that.
Well, I
but they
guess
own that.
we could guarantee it, right? So we could guarantee those bonds. So it would be the sewer authority with a guarantee by Radnor, and they wouldn't have any problem with that. Probably. You could talk them into it, John.
Sure.
Well, and if we're concerned about coming up against our legal capacity to issue debt,
I'm not. I just want to
We're
keep it.
nowhere
I want to
near.
keep that separate. I think so. What we see here is we're going to have a difficult time going through and isolating the projects. It would be great to take that element out of it and put it where it belongs on separate financing. That's what I'm trying to do.
well, we would be doing that at a Radnor Township fund level. At the legal piece of issuing the bonds would be that it would be Radnor Township backing the bonds. So on our entity-wide statements, it would show
still
up
be
there.
debt, yeah.
But as we budget on a fund level, the bonds themselves, both the asset, the liability, and the annual expense would all be hitting Fund 2 by itself. And it would not, those would be separate from the rest of our conversation with the Willows and these other capital projects. So just to be,
No, I was going to say, from sitting in the RHM meetings, that would never fly. I'm just telling you. But I believe, and that's why I want those numbers to see what it would take for us to accomplish that goal. I like Don's idea of moving the top three, but I'd also include the proceeds from the Boy Scout house into the capital fund for the Willows now, understanding that we're going to have to address it as part of the continuing capital plan. And we can even show a number, we just don't have to have the asset. So whatever those four total, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, it's a little over $1 million. The top three by themselves is 825,000 even.
Right. But the idea is that gets us down to $750,000, and hopefully the Friends, or the whatever name they've adopted, will be able to do some additional fundraising.
Well, John, why don't you make that motion, and then to have that added to the budget?
All right, I move that we transfer, as shown on this slide, Fund 18, well, the top three, and then the proceeds from the Boy Scout House to the capital budget dedicated to the Willows.
I second that. Let me just try and clarify this one more time. That number would go in as, under the Willows, as expenses that we are revenue that we are willing to raise, and the money would show from these sources as revenue coming in as well.
Yes.
So it would be both, it would be on both ends. So it actually
No.
wouldn't change what we need to raise for 2018. So the revenues, the sources would include, we're taking this money from general fund, and it becomes a source, and then we're going to put it in the spending for 2018, an exactly equal number to those four. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see
So
what
it's
you're
not, we
saying.
don't need to
and-
raise new dollars if we commit to these dollars going to the Willows.
Well, if the board's committing to funding the improvements, we should put the full 2.8 million.
Okay.
We should identify the $1 million donor, and we can identify these four sources as well,
sources.
but there will be a funding gap
Okay,
created.
so then it would be shown with these four sources as, these four items as sources, offsetting the total amount, whatever it is, 1.7, 1.8.
Right, but hold on, we haven't agreed on a total amount. So the only direction you have tonight, which is a step forward, which is, if you're going to do this, in my opinion, that's the right step to take, is to direct them to create the anchor of 1.014000 that populates the Willows Fund as revenue, and then the remaining budget, would close that gap, and then we would finalize the spending side, because corollary to that is the spending side. If we choose to close that gap with only $300,000, then we close that spending side with $1.3 million. So the spending side is not determined. The fullness of the revenue side is not determined. John's motion just provides a big chunk of that. So it's conceptually, it's the right. I'm going to vote against more than I believe we should, but it's the right step you need to take if you're going to move this project forward.
Right, is there any other comment from commissioners on this?
Well, I guess to me, what John just proposed provides $1 million commitment to the Willows
Yes.
in 2018.
Yes.
That's what that
Well,
does.
2018 and beyond, because you're not going to spend $1
Right,
million.
right,
It's-
and beyond.
it's-
So now it's not the 1.8, which is what the number is, but it is that $1 million. That's what
Yes.
he's saying right there.
Yeah.
And I would add to it, I think that there's no way to get around the replenishment of the fund balance. You know, I think in the end, we ought to issue bonds for the sanitary sewer. So however we do it, I was hoping we could get it off of our books, but apparently not.
So in one of the sort of odd things that you're doing tonight is that you're taking money out of the general fund that would otherwise go to capital, putting it into the Willows Fund, okay? And then you're taking money out of sewer fund and putting it back in to pay the money that went out. If that money from the proceeds doesn't go toward this project, then it becomes part of the capital fund that goes to other projects.
Anyway, you could say that about any project.
Okay, but it's
The money's
just,
fungible, but the issue is we already spent the money for the sewer project, so that's already depleted. So the first piece of it is we had a debit, right? And so that reduced our fund balance because it was an emergency, and I just hope that we can find a way. If we pay for it as we go, then we're going to have a pretty big sewer fee increase, and I think that's going to be a problem. So I think that as a basis, right? So when we're talking about this, what is the baseline assumptions? Baseline assumption to me is we need to replenish the general fund that was depleted through the sanitary sewer repair. And I guess that number is 2 million or is it 1.6 million?
3.5 million.
Is it a million? It was a million that started out, and the last number I heard Steve said it got up to almost 2 million something?
The total amount that the general fund is going to transfer is 3.5 million.
Just for the sanitary sewer work.
Yes.
Yes.
For which projects? Not for the emergency one is King Prussia Road. That was under 2
There
million.
were 3 emergency projects done this year.
King of Prussia, Skunk Hollow, and Rolls, right?
Yes.
Those 3.
All right, is there any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Is there any staff discussion?
Madam President, just one thing that I think the board's going to have to determine. I know you're looking to commit over $1 million. I still think that until the board determines what is the total cost of construction, because I still think you have to determine what that's going to be. And I think that first phase with the design, the architect, what is that going to be? Because we know with the library, we ended up a little bit more than where that is until we make that determination. But also the operations. Is the township going to have to subsidize the operation? That's the other aspect. So I think before the board would commit to the full funding of this, I think there's still some questions you're still going to have to answer. So I think by committing the full $1 million,
Well, it's not, the full $1 million is not even that, there's no world in which that's all that it is. It's going to be far beyond that. It's a $1.7 million need.
So hold on a second, though.
but one of the
No,
things
no,
about-
but we got to challenge that. It is what we decide it will be. If you want it to be a $1.7 million project, it will be a $1.7 million. If you want it to be a $1 million project, it will be a $1 million project. So we can't assume that it has to be $1.7 million and we have to spend that money. This is discretionary spending. If you want it to be 1.7, it's 1.7. If you want it to be 2.7, it's 2.7. I believe I'm saying similar things to what Bob is saying, that what we have been presented with tonight is an overwhelmingly large and expensive demand on capital. And as I see it, you're spending a sizable amount of money on discretionary things, and everyone has to know that it is discretionary.
And
I
I agree
agree,
with that.
except that you just one point about that. It's not a random number that we're deciding to spend. We commissioned a business study and a business plan, which we received, and some of us are accepting that this was a plan that we liked and we want to see happen. So if we want to scale back on the plan, we can ask the entities that are doing the work to do that. But what we were presented was $2.7 million. So
You're presenting it as if that's the only way it could be done is in that manner.
that is
And
what was
the key-
presented to us.
Right, but the key is what you said a moment ago, because you like it and you want it. That the reason it costs $1.7 million is because you like it and you want it. There was another plan that cost much less. You didn't like it and you didn't want it. So the key is just, we have to understand that this is discretionary spending. We might choose to do it, but it is not a number that we have to spend. It isn't like the sewer project in which the number was 3.5 million, and it would be 3.5 million no matter what.
Got it.
The only other thing with that is, by John's motion right here, this is the highest priority project on the list because it's getting money first. And
No.
it's difficult with missing the meeting on the 6th. I've forgotten the other items that are in there, whether this should be the number one thing that is addressed first.
No. The reason that this is coming out as a singular item is it's the only thing that wasn't included in the budget, purposefully, because they didn't want to set the anchor. So that's why this is being called out, not because it's
All right,
more
this is not going to displace anything on
No.
the other.
No. This does displace. Because the budget, correct, this now we have to come up with this corresponding amount of money elsewhere. So again, if you like it and you want it, then spend the money. But we all have to understand that this is not, this is a discretionary item for us that is displacing other items that some of us would think to be essential and that some of us would think to be discretionary and also of value.
All right, is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on the motion on the floor? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor of John Nagel's motion, say aye. Aye. And any opposed? And that passes 4-1. All right, so are you clear with what that motion was and what to do with it, Bill?
Yeah, my understanding is we're going to build into the capital plan funding for the Willows mansion improvements to include these 4 items on this slide, and then an expense amount that matches that level of funding, and then we're going to identify an unapproved amount of spending for the balance up to 1.8 million and change that the board has not committed to yet, but we're identifying at least as a baseline going forward.
The next iteration of budget that we get will essentially be an unbalanced budget?
On the capital side, yes.
Yes.
All right.
And if we commit to a bond issue for the sewer repairs, then that would balance that, we would cover that, right?
Well, we'd cover the sewer piece, presumably.
Right.
We'd still have a general capital piece of this that does not have enough funding yet.
Well, we would be replenishing the fund balance. You'd take that out of fund balance then. The fund balance wouldn't.
If that's the decision by the board, then the
Yeah.
answer is yes.
Okay, let's move on to community organization funding. So the numbers that were proposed to us in the budget are on page, I don't know what page, 122?
I can pull it up.
Yeah, pull them up.
Just bear with me one sec while I find it. There we go. So I think what we had, in the original presentation way back at the first meeting in October, we just wanted to carve out this piece of the discussion and make sure that the board was on the same page as what was being proposed. Starting with the library, if you'll recall, a year ago, we had pulled back the contributions by an amount, I forget the exact dollar amount, but it was with the understanding that their staffing was scaled back at the time because of the improvements. The understanding for 2018 is that they're going to be back into the new improved building and be back to what would be considered a more normal operation. We had reached out to them late summer and asked what an amount would be. And they had an initial budget number that they provided us, and so that's what we included, and that is the $929,600 number. And it would represent a 6% increase over what was contributed this year. But if we look back to 2016, we were at 904 then. So really, the 929,600, had our contributions had the normal increase that we normally give, we'd be about the same number anyway. So that's what was included. There are members here tonight from the library if the board has any additional questions. And then as far as what was included for the other organizations, they were varying percentages, but mostly it was just normal increases to those that we provide increases to. And then rounded to the nearest $1,000, which is why the percentages are different. And then For the parades and Radnor Historical Society, well, the Historical Society is a relatively new contribution that began just, I think, 2 years ago. That's been a fixed amount in each of the years, so we kept it fixed. And then the parades have been $4,000 per parade as long as I've been here with Radnor, so that hasn't changed. So that's why those numbers are what they are. The Radnor Studio 2021 is a direct pass-through. We pass through 100% of what we get from Comcast. So that number, that 56,059, is tied directly to a revenue estimate. If it turns out that the Comcast PEG number is 60,000, that expense will be 60, but that's tied to a specific revenue, as is the WBA and WPC, the Wayne Presbyterian Church parking revenue share. So really what we wanted direction from the board on tonight mostly dealt with the library, the Art Center, Surrey, the senior services, and then the Parades and Historical Society, making sure that we're all on the same page there.
All right, if there's not any comment on this board, if there's anybody from one of these organizations that has any comment on the number that's been proposed, either positive or negative, you're welcome to come up.
I have a quick question. The last two items that you identified, Bill, so we don't have spending associated with those. That's just a transfer. To whom is that transferred?
So we have a revenue sharing agreement with both the Wayne Business Association and the Wayne Presbyterian Church, where we take actual parking revenue,
Right.
and we take whatever percentage is those two organizations, and we cut a check to that organization.
And that's what that represents.
That's what this represents.
So if there are particular projects, for example, the WPC, then it would be up to Chris to tell us what those projects would be or how.
The WBA piece,
WBA,
yes.
excuse me, yeah.
And actually, it was part of the resolution that was adopted by the board. That's part of the responsibility of the WBA, is to report back on what those dollars are being used for.
And why was it zero for 2017?
We didn't get that yet.
Actually, we've since cut the check, but the last time I updated the spreadsheet was before that check was cut. And actually, prior to 2016, the way it was accounted for is that it was a reduction of revenue. There was not a dedicated expense line to track the expense side of it. So we were just showing net revenues. So in 2016, to be consistent with how we're reporting all of our other revenue and expense activities, we created dedicated expense lines. So I forget the exact number of the check we cut, but it's close to 14,000 for this year. And so that's the basis for the estimate next year. But the actual check will be based on what the actual revenue was from those parking spots.
50% of the revenue actually is what the resolution states, minus the discount card revenue.
Well, the 50, yeah, so it's 50% of the actual revenue generated. The actual revenue generated is reduced because of the discounted parking cards that are offered. So it's,
That's still,
yeah, it's off the
we
top,
could
not
argue
the
that.
bottom.
I'd love to argue that one day, but I won't for now. Can I talk about take this opportunity? Because I'd love to see the WBA parking fund. So I am much more relieved because the amount I want to ask for is so minuscule compared to what you're talking about. It should be very easy to pass and give it to us. Seriously. Especially because what we're asking for is to improve the WBOD, to actually improve, to bring more people in, which in part improves mercantile tax. The more sales we have, the more money you guys make. I believe that's called the additional revenues that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So those additional revenues this year, and I can't wait to talk to Bill about that later, I think is going to be on an average between 8 and 10% down from the WBOD compared to last year. Okay?
It's going to be a reduction in?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so. Just talking to, what I do every day is talk to our businesses. For lots of reasons, whether it's the perception of parking, the construction that's been going on for the past year and a half, which is necessary, but it was brutal. Okay, you can't close your sidewalks and expect people for 6 or 7 months and expect people to continue to come and try to shop in your town. Okay, with that started a lot of things. Started like a little rolling down the hill effect. So when PICO came in, they noticed a lot of the trees that are up were dangerous, and since then the township has come and trimmed and taken some dangerous trees away. Okay, they actually just did the church lot, I believe, the other day, which I think they were run off the week before, and then a branch fell down on a car, and then they were allowed to come back and trim the trees. Unbelievable how that happens. But with that, we've started a long, timely discussion about the streetscape. Okay, I mean, we have cracked sidewalks, which most have been fixed now because of PICO coming through. We have empty tree spots. We have trees that are very large with roots piling out of them. I just found out the other day, 20 years ago, there were actually grates on those trees. But we do have a plan that's already there of places where we can redo the trees. We would like to light them. We had an opportunity when PICO was here, and we didn't take advantage of it. We need to spruce up the town. You know, and when I say the town, we're talking about the WBOD, talking about North Wayne Avenue, we're talking about Lancaster on east or north and south, east and west, or really just west. So let me rephrase that. And when I say West Lancaster, you know, this project started, it was a lot smaller. Okay, we were just looking, you know, because of budgetary reasons and what the WBA can actually provide and match as well. We wanted to, you know, we're business people, we want to keep it budgetary. But over the year and a half, now everybody is trying to put their hands in the pot and figure out how to fix everything. Luckily enough, Steve Orsini came up with a great diagram and a great process. So what I really want to do is ask for $200,000 from you guys, which obviously is a drop in the bucket. It's not a problem at all for you guys to take care of, and just pop over to the WBOD, and we'll make sure it all goes well. And we'll obviously report back to you. Can I get a motion? I mean, come on. $100 million here and there, it's all good. Seriously, though, with the funds that we receive from parking revenue share, with something about maybe $50,000 or $60,000 from the township, we can get the project that's on this paper that you have not been, you know, I couldn't actually email it today, sorry, privy to yet. I think we can get it done for a proper amount.
So that's 60,000 in addition to the 40 that's provided there?
14.
Yeah.
Sounds like the church gets a lot more than we do.
Right.
And they don't have any trees
Excuse
in
me.
the parking lot.
Okay, right. In addition to the 14.
14, yes.
And how much are you asking for?
Yeah, let's say 60. We can start there.
60 in addition.
Yeah.
So my bid 55.
Can I get a 50?
And there's a
negotiate.
WBA match in that, to that?
Well, there's those funds, and then if we get this going, then yes, we will utilize fundraising techniques to see what else we can raise. But this is something that the board has approved. We've talked to the businesses. A new streetscape is key.
How about enhancement trust?
Yes, we have to talk to them.
Madam President, if I may.
Yes.
83,000 we're looking to propose to come out of the shade tree fund,
Okay.
which we have a healthy.
Is that in the budget right now?
We have a healthy, there's no money appropriated in that fund, but we have a healthy balance in that due to fines that we have, which I know there is additional money that will be entering that fund, but 83,000 is what we've put together as part of this that Steve has been working on, that we would, if the board would like to see further, we would actually put that in the next iteration for the board to look at and review.
Does that 83, does that balance include the Chanticleer money? I mean, I ask because we need to be very mindful of the way we spend their money.
Well, we do, and a lot of that is spent with John Hosbeck. A lot of that is spent with John. And John, I know we've utilized him more with the Shade Tree Committee, also evaluating a lot of our trees that we have So a lot of this would come actually for the tree replanting. Again, as the board remembers, 60,000 we did generate just on one fine from one
Yep.
project.
Chris, what about RECT?
That's what I just
Radnor
said.
Dam Trust? Yeah, exactly. I've already reached out. They're waiting for a proper quote for tree grates, because those are expensive as well. But once we know, we can actually.
Do you know what their balance is?
I
So that
believe-
fund should have zero. You should
know.
spend it all down.
No
And
kidding.
we should use our moral authority to make them spend it down, or we can't make them do anything, but.
I will gladly
So
try as
find
well.
out, what I would like you to do. Find out how much is in, you can find that out, bring it to us, and we will pass a motion asking them to spend that down for projects of this caliber, whether it's this one or something else, but.
Well, we asked about that a year ago,
We've done that
Bill.
Here, look, here.
You know, what was
I can
in
answer
there?
this real fast. So the money that is dedicated to the WBOD in the Radnor Enhancement Trust, I believe is around $40,000. With a proper project and improvements that, the key is they have a certain phrase you have to use. It has to be improvements that are there to last. So whether it's new trees, however they needed to word it in this project, we can find something there that's worded properly, whether it's the tree grates, whether it's electrical lines that they'll pay for, that sort of thing. They're not going to pay for lights that are in the trees, but they can pay for improvements that will help the WBOD.
So you need
in the long run.
around $75,000, correct?
Yeah.
And we have identified 3 sources of money.
Yeah.
The 14,000 there, the Radnor.
No, well, there's 27 from the WBA from that fund that we're willing to put forward to it.
Okay, well, there's 14
It's
coming
2
from
years,
the
yeah.
township, though.
Yeah, we haven't-
Okay, so,
Just remember, $14,000 doesn't pay for any project at any year, at any time.
but if we use the funds that we provide you, the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust funds, and the funds from the Shade Tree, those 3 funds can get that project done. So to me, that's what, if you want that, to me, that's what you do. You start out with the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust and tell them that we're matching funds. They're matching our funds, we're matching theirs.
I think we're still 25 shy right off the top of my head, but that's what I'm talking about.
Can I just clarify, Bob? I'm looking, the shade tree item that I see in our budget has 150 for contractual services. That's all I'm seeing in there. Am I reading that correctly? It doesn't, it has a 0 for the Chanticleer item, it has 0 for operating supplies, it just has 150 for contractual services, which I'm thinking is John High. So is that the account that you're suggesting that we take 60 out of?
I interpreted it that there's a positive balance in the fund, and
From
you would.
last year
you
that
would
we
s-
didn't spend down?
You would spend down the fund balance, essentially.
Oh, the fifth, Commissioner,
Yeah.
I'm hesitating on the 150. I'm not sure but Commissioner Curley's correct. There's forecasted to be at the end of 2017, 165,000 and change in that fund.
Okay.
So we would be using some of that fund balance to fund this project.
Okay. And then
the
proposed
the next
spending-
version of the budget would include that in it if the board directs us to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Before we get to that, I'd like it to include rec funds. And if we can't provide rec funds because we don't have the capability, then we can make a decision to augment it. But I would like the next version to reflect the rec funds, and then if we can't convince them to spend it, we'll have another discussion about where to get the money from. So does anybody disagree with that? Radnor Enhancement Community Trust.
Trust. So you're saying 60 plus their match of 40, or you're saying
Well,
offset?
The project is roughly around $75,000, right? That's what I heard you say.
No, I said it was $200,000.
Okay. So,
Minus about 75,000 from the Shade Tree Commission.
Well, Chris, you said 60. So 60 plus the 14 is where he's getting the 75.
yeah.
Go for it.
So we have to come up with you're asking us to come up with $75,000?
Well, 60 in addition to the 14.
Okay, 75
Yeah.
plus or minus. So the three sources of funding for this are the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust, the 2 annual payments that we make, and augmentation from the shade tree, from the fund balance of the shade tree fund. So to me, that's how I would like it to present itself. And if we can't get the rec funds, then we have to have a discussion about where or if we're choosing to come up with an additional
you're
40.
willing to have that conversation? Because I think the rec funds, what I could see are tree grates that they would go for, and that's
Yeah.
around $23,000.
Yeah, there's enough in I mean, you and I have discussed the
Oh, yeah,
project.
I know there's enough.
There's enough in there that they can fund with their mission. Okay.
So
Part of the project.
I'll make a motion to change that line item from 14 to 75.
Second.
Did you hear that, Bill?
Could I ask maybe that we have a chance to kind of pull all this together?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can I come back to you?
Table that, table that.
Can I like sort of broaden it to that we fund the project that Chris identified using a combination of the township funds that we already provide, Radnor Enhancement Community Trust funds, and the surplus of the Shade Tree Fund. And then you can figure out what numbers go in which spreadsheet box.
Yeah, maybe yes.
Okay, I withdraw my motion.
Well, thank you very much for listening.
Thank
And
you
Appreciate it.
for
Chris,
coming out.
so
Thanks, Chris.
can I get you also to look at moving that, at least, I'd like to see some of this happen on the western portion down by my end too. So we have those old unattractive Cobra lights. So some way of extending that.
Yes, well, we could throw that in there too.
Well, that's adding to the
Very good.
70.
But that's what,
There are 7 trees,
hold on
or
a
8
second.
trees down there.
But that's
that
what,
need lights and-
that's part of it is that I got, for me to support it, I got to see it
Yeah,
in that
well-
end. So I at least want to have the conversation about I want to sort of know how much it would cost, those sort of things, and
You got it.
and if it could be moved in.
Chris, you
remember,
said it was
this
only
started-
the
this
west,
started-
you said it was Lancaster Avenue West from
From,
from
North
Wayne Jewelers
to the
from
bike
Nor- from
line,
North-
to the library.
to the library.
Yeah. And,
Nothing east.
oh yeah, east. Both sides east to Luella Court, basically.
And East has some
Oh,
improvements
not on
already.
the west side. On the west Lancaster east? No. They could use lights, because it is a dark, like I
Yes,
said, it's dark.
and also it doesn't have the, that west of North Wayne Avenue doesn't have the decorative lights that North Wayne, South Wayne, and east of Lancaster Avenue
Yeah,
has.
that was dropped a long time ago.
Yeah, so
It
so
should be-
what,
Should be brought back up
what
again.
we want, what I want is, for some of this, it doesn't have to, it's not, at the end of the year, it's going to be just like everywhere else, but I'd like to see it gravitate.
Oh, glad you get the cost for this. No problem.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. You got it. Thank you.
Any of the other community organizations who wants to comment on their proposed level of funding?
Hi, Jay Cable,
Hi.
Wayne Ward 6. Just a clarification, when we're talking about using shade tree funds, what can we use the shade tree funds for this project, and are there restrictions? So when we talk about
Yes,
lighting,
planting trees.
so the shade tree fund would just be used for the
That's what
planting
he'll
trees?
have to figure out. So there's a sizable planting cost, and that's what they're shaking their head at. Yes, they'll work the tree cost into it.
Okay, because on the last shade tree commission meeting, we also put in a request for, I think, $20,000 as part of the master tree plan. So I don't know if this will coincide with that or not, but it's something you probably want to take a look at.
And I would also note, we haven't taken all the trees from the cairn there, there's a lot of trimming that we were going to continue. I thought we had money that didn't need to be the fund, but I want to make sure we get that.
Yeah, we have the contractor trying to coordinate so that as we
Yeah.
take those down, we're going to chip them at the same time.
So generally, I don't know how I know we arrived at that number because I know we discussed it last year, and I know I voted on that number, and we've had this discussion, but generally, I'd like the funds to be less full. I mean, we should be spending more of that money than saving it, I think. So like an example is, $20,000, we can probably do this and the $20,000 that the Shade Tree has asked for and still have a sizable fund balance in the Shade Tree Fund.
Yeah, I believe that the recommendation from Shade Tree is that the $20,000, they did not want to see the Shade Tree funds used. I think their recommendation asked that general fund dollars be used. That was the summary we got from Steve Norsini. So.
And I wouldn't know why we would use general fund money to do that when we have a balance of $170,000 in the Shade Tree Fund specifically dedicated for that function. So for me, I'd like to see those fund balances come down, more trees planted, lights on the trees, that sort of thing.
All right, so I see no other community organizations commenting on the levels that there have been proposed. So I'm going to assume that everyone's happy with the levels that have been proposed. Nobody here is objecting, so let's keep them where they are and move on to the fire company. So in the general fund, we have an increase of funding proposed from, I think, 125 last year to 225 this year, it looks like.
Well, we did not include in the township manager's recommended budget the request of the fire company for additional funding. This is one that was identified in that initial presentation as something that we wanted to bring back for further discussion.
Okay.
So that's why it's a line item on tonight's budget. And since it's a sizable increase that they are asking for, and there are specific reasons as to why they're asking for it, we did ask the company to come tonight and give the board an update on the amount and the reasons. And I know they're in the crowd here tonight, so if the board's okay with it, I think. Bill, could you put that up? Yeah, it's actually on the podium laptop.
And
So.
Bill, does that 2017 number reflect 17 we increased? 17 is an increase over 16, correct? Due to
Yes, so we increased over the last 2 years, we provided increase. I'm scrolling up in the spreadsheet, sorry, that's why it's jumping around, but I'm scrolling up to, so we added 125,000 this year for an ALS subsidy. For 2017, I combined
I see.
the normal contributions in the ALS subsidy to provide, because I was just trying to save a row on the spreadsheet from adding another line item. But basically what's being requested is another line item for additional funding for the fire company. So there's no amount included now. So if the board elects to provide additional funding, it'll be an added expense over what has been recommended already.
And so I'm just clear, this is in the general fund, the recommended spending is $934,000. There's also a line item in the capital budget for fire service contributions for another $250,000.
Yes. So, yeah, so there hasn't been a request for additional capital funding from either of the fire companies that we provide funding to, so that number is consistent with prior years.
That's just our regular giving every year.
Yes.
And those are just contributions, not earmarked for any equipment or whatnot.
Their contributions for capital.
For capital, okay.
We don't, we stop short of assigning those dollars to specific capital replacement.
And this 900 are operations.
Yeah, understand that currently the biggest chunk of that is the volunteer fire relief aid. That's monies that flow through the municipalities from the state. We're basically the middleman. We're required to take receipt of those funds and then within 30 days distribute it to the fire company. So there is a $350,000 revenue offset, and we're merely a pass-through on that. The true funding for the fire companies is in these other totals.
Okay.
And it does show
even
capital and ops. So the capital looks like 125 on line 322. And what is ALS again? ALS subsidy? ALS?
It's for the ambulance services.
What does
The
ALS stand for?
Advanced Life Service, Support Service,
All right,
the ambulance.
so, but we have capital and ops in there.
I apologize. That description is outdated. We stopped it, when I first built the spreadsheet, that was both.
Okay, so let's hear about the new funding that we're being asked for that's not reflected in this budget. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight.
We don't contribute to that anymore.
Bill, if you wouldn't mind, could you just pull that back up real quick? Yeah.
Ian, can you just switch it back to my laptop real quick? The one other aspect to this $934 total is that we do account for hydrant water that we pay to Aqua. That's not direct support to any of the fire companies, but it's included in this cost center because it's fire-related service.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam President, Commissioners, public, my name is Eamon Berzunas. I'm the Administrative Director at Radnor Fire Company, joined tonight by President James Kelly and Deputy Chief Douglas Felsky. I'm a full-time employee at the fire company, as many of you know, and Doug and Jim have put in almost 80 years of combined volunteer service to the Radnor community. So glad they could be here tonight. Real quick, I just wanted to go through, and I appreciate Finance Director White mentioning the part about the hydrants. That's two things that are critical on this. You're looking at that $934,000 number. Is one, the relief was pointed out. Relief funding is restricted funding. We cannot use that for paid staff, which is why we're here tonight asking for additional operating support. As silly as it sounds, we do get a lot of money from the state in that regard, but they've not reduced the restriction or eliminate that restriction where we can use it to pay for salaries or for benefits, which will continue to be a burden on the fire company and ultimately on the community, as retaining and bringing in new volunteers in the fire company remains a constant challenge. So that's $350,000, again, restricted funding. Hydrants are mentioned. The other thing that's important with hydrant money, that is paid directly to Aqua, gets reflected under fire company budget, not necessarily germane to Radnor. It's done in different townships. Typically, it's a cross-departmental usage. Our Public Works Department uses the hydrants sometimes more than we do. For different functions they conduct with permission from Aqua. So it's really cross-departmental usage. It's not germane to fire company usage. However, it is reflected in our budget, and it's sizable, $142,000. And the different items on there, liability workers' comp, that's direct to support to Radnor Fire Company, even though the township takes care of that. That is support to Radnor Fire Company. Bryn Mawr support for operations, as well as $83,000. Or $83,000 for capital, which is reflected in another part of the budget. Brumall's on there at $8,000. ALS, as Commissioner Booker pointed out, that specifically was built into the budget last year to help with the EMS billing shortfall, and that has been a huge benefit to the fire company, helping to plug that hole. So that's why that was added into the budget last year. Talked about relief, and then we have gas, oil, and lubricants, which is direct support to Radnor Fire Company. So thank you. Just wanted to roll through that. That's, I mean, obviously it can get confusing to look at it, and there's a lot of different numbers for the public, but we like, to clarify that for everybody. All right, so now we want to run through this. We know you have a lot on the agenda, so we'll keep it moving. We'll certainly answer any questions that you may have. Is there a trick to this? Page down.
Enter.
Okay, there we go. We'll run through this. I won't go through each of these items listed on the table of contents just for sake of time. We'll hit all each of these topics. Ongoing variables, we've talked at numerous meetings for the fire company. As you know, most of what we're dealing with are volunteers. Volunteerism is going to continue to be an ongoing real challenge for the community. And again, this is not specific to Radnor. This is across the country. Pennsylvania is one of those volunteer-rich states with volunteers providing fire and emergency medical services. State and federal legislation, we've talked about that. It seems almost ad nauseum at a lot of these meetings. A lot of these things are out of our control, especially relates to ambulance billing reimbursement from both the state and federal side. EMS billing paramedics, we've talked about that at length, especially as our population continues to age. We get in what we Medicare and Medicaid type of reimbursement, which is significantly reduced payments that we receive if we respond to calls where people have that type of insurance. Labor costs, again, we've already mentioned that will continue to increase. Call volumes have remained on the fire side for Radnor Fire Company between 700 and 900 fire responses, and between 2,200 and 2,400 emergency medical services calls. About 90% of the responses, both for fire and ambulance, occur in Radnor Township. The balance of those responses occur in Tredyffrin Township and the sliver that we have on a first due basis, as well as some mutual aid calls that we have to surrounding municipalities for things like structure fires or serious accidents. One thing this year, we talked about this before, we're moving to a true calendar year basis with our budgeting. For tonight's purposes, we just wanted to show the board our most recent fiscal year, and that runs from April through March 31st of 2017. So we summarized some of these categories for everybody. Budget income, without a doubt, ambulance billing. That is the #1 revenue source for us. So when we're billing those calls, that is how we're providing our services, namely the labor that goes into providing the services, especially during daytime hours, which we're going to talk about. Municipal contributions also significant, especially with the support we receive from Radnor Township. Without the municipal support from Radnor specifically, we would have a big problem. We do receive funding support from Tredyffrin, as you see on there, at $30,000. We've been working with them closely with our partner fire companies in Tredyffrin and Easttown Townships on a long-term funding strategy, as well as a funding formula on how to deal with these increases that inevitably are going to be coming up here soon, especially as it relates to labor, which you've already mentioned a few times. And the third biggest thing for us, fundraising and donations. We have an extremely generous community. Many people in the room here probably already donate to the fire company. Again, without those people that provide that extra kick into our budget, we don't exist. So that, person on a fixed income that can only contribute $10, or the residents can do a little bit more, huge difference for the fire company on an annual basis. And as Finance Director White pointed out, and we just want to footnote it on here, that $200,000 of capital, obviously that's not going to show up in our operating budget per se, but we did footnote that's something we received during the year. On the expense side, you see our labor component. By far our #1 expense. We have a relatively newer facility, 20 years old. But we have a roof that needs to get replaced, unfortunately. That will take place in April. That's going to cost between $80,000 to $90,000 to get that replaced. So unfortunately, it's something we're going to have to deal with in 2018. And just some of the different categories. Vehicle, that encompasses all of our fleet. So engines, ambulances, SUVs, that's everything wrapped in all together. Just some different categories, how we outlay our budget. But again, overwhelmingly, labor, paid labor, part-time and full-time benefits, that's the #1 expense. So from a fiscal year perspective, we did pretty good. And a large reason that was the case is because we received that ALS subsidy to help with that EMS billing shortfall, which we've previously talked about at meetings here with you all. One of the things in talking to the staff, and we've been really focused on, okay, when are these calls happening? It shouldn't really be too surprising to everybody that for fire and ambulance calls, we get this the 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning hour, we start to see a dramatic increase in activity. Everybody's going to work, schools are filling up, businesses are filling up, hustle and bustle, things are happening. That's when the calls happen. So especially on our ambulance side, we really spike up during the day. So our 12-hour period, 7 to 7 as we call it, that's prime time for us. and also it's the most difficult time to get volunteers to respond. So that just gives you a snapshot, and that's real time. That's through the end of this past October. We can certainly provide more data if you'd like, but that gives you a good idea of what happens here during the day as far as our performance with fire and ambulance calls. Right now, current staffing, we have 45 active volunteer fire and EMS personnel. So we have personnel that serve on our board of directors that don't participate with fire and ambulance activity, and that's okay. That lightens the load on those volunteers that need to respond to emergencies. We have our auxiliary, which provides tremendous support to the fire company, and again, a lot of people don't necessarily respond to emergencies, but they help out with our Breakfast of Santa, our Easter Bunny event, and some different activities throughout the year, and it helps to raise a little bit of funding for the fire company. So again, it's a nice little support network for the fire company. Right now, we have 27 full-time and part-time employees combined, and we're going to get to the staffing requests. Right now, our staffing target's 10. We've had some people leave. They've just moved on with their career, or things have changed where they're not able to work in our schedule matrix. So we have some backfilling to do, and we'd like to get to the 9th and 10th employee. The one thing that we found, and this is true really with a lot of neighboring agencies, we utilize part-timers a lot because we can't afford to go up to 15, 16 full-time employees, which would make life a lot easier, but there's a significant expense on that. So we're trying to balance this out where we can still use part-timers, but we need to get that FTE pool up just because the way it works, guys work 3 or 4 different jobs, and like you're almost robbing Peter to pay Paul with everybody. So with full-timers, when we get them in the door, they have more allegiance to work full-time with the fire company and be able to do more. Where part-time, it's really difficult to get people in the door and have them stay for a number of years. So we'll get people for a 2-year, 3-year clip, and then we're back recycling and going through the hiring process again. It's time intensive, and again, we're a smaller organization, so we don't have a robust HR structure per se, so it takes extra time for us to get those things done. When stressing volunteerism, I mean, the biggest thing for us, or really a few things here, need for two-income households. I mean, you all know this. Probably everybody watching at home understands that. We live in an awesome area. It's expensive to live here. You're not going to find too many people where it's the mom or the dad, and they're wherever both parents are doing something. That's definitely a huge change since these two gentlemen started. We had a lot more volunteers when they started, and that need wasn't necessarily there as it is today. So that's an issue for us. Lack of shift workers. Most guys and gals are working 9 to 5, and they leave and don't work in the area. So we lose them Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You see the call statistics. That's where it's very difficult to get responders during the day. Increased training requirements. That's across the board, fire and EMS. Minimal incentives. Some things we've talked about offline with a few of the commissioners about possible tax credits that can get done with some of the recent legislation the last year or two the states provided. But again, that is also something that is a hindrance. Not many incentives. Limited housing options for recent college graduates, young families. I mean, we have at least 10 people I could rattle off that they just left the area. Super active people, heavily trained, and they've gone to Honeybrook. They've gone to Gilbertsville, Montgomery County. They've moved out of the area. They can't afford to live here. So you lose someone who's got 10 or 15 years in an organization. You don't replace that today. It takes years to get people like that back into your mix at the fire company, and that's a wave that's happening at every volunteer organization that I've been involved with directly or indirectly. And finally, I mean, just a general overall lack of public understanding of how the fire company works. As we've talked about, we do have a lot of paid people, but we still rely predominantly on volunteers to make the engine go. And it's weird, like we talk to people like, everybody's paid, or they think everybody's volunteer. I mean, typically they think everybody's paid and that 100% of their taxes pay for fire and EMS. So we're kind of fighting that a little bit. And you get people that maybe lived in the city and they've moved out to the suburbs, so they're used in the city, everything's paid. They come out here, they get a fund drive letter, and like, what's going on? And I field a lot of those phone calls at the fire company, And most of the time, you do get people, "Oh, okay, I get it, I understand." Probably like 8 out of 10 people you talk to, once you explain it, but that's like a never-ending vicious cycle that we're stuck in. So again, whatever the township can do to promote that awareness, both volunteerism and how we're funded, is critical, because that really helps us with our fundraising efforts through the direct mail and just generally making pleas for support. We have a lot of projects that we did in 17-18, just highlight a couple. The biggest one we got, Engine 15, that purchase completed, and that was due in large part due to the capital contributions that the township provides to the fire company. That's $200,000 year over year. So we've completed that project. They replaced a 1996 unit. So typically with the engines, you want to get into at least 15 years is a reasonable target for a volunteer fire company like us with our call volume. So we're, obviously 96, so now it's a little over that, but nevertheless, 15 years, we got good usage out of that unit. We're moving right now in 18 to replace a 99 engine, so that process has got going. The other thing of note, in 17 was completed, and this is something we talked about at previous meetings, our communications antenna out back, that got replaced with a light tower, and primarily because it was unsafe. That serves as our backup communication system at the fire company, and we got it done finally. I mean, it took a lot of planning, a lot of back and forth. We appreciate the cooperation of the township in getting that project completed, as well as the neighbors being understanding of why we had to replace that tower. We talked about recruitment retention a little bit, but the main thing this year we're trying to focus on is doing more outreach with the college and university. The one unique feature, as you all well know, unlike areas west and east of us, we're in a good pocket. We have a lot of schools we can rely on. So in theory, you can get some volunteers out of those areas. So we're really going to double down and focus on that this year, as well as doing more via our website and our social media page, just getting that awareness out there about the fire company. And again, the heavy reliance on volunteers. So that's going to be a big focus for us this year. We'll get to the funding request, but we're going to modify our paid staff schedule. So our board of directors met a month ago at this point, and we made some decisions about what we want to staff at, what service level we want to provide to the community. That's part of the dialogue, a little bit of dialogue we want to have tonight. We understand you won't necessarily make a decision tonight, but we need to get some feedback from the towns as far as what your comfort level is with what we're proposing as far as staffing of the ambulances and also utilizing that staff to respond to fire calls. I already mentioned the new roof. I mean, unfortunately, that's just a pain in the butt. I mean, it's leaking today, so we really can't get that replaced fast enough, but that'll occur. Targets April, May of 2018, and President Kelly and our House Committee Chairperson, Ginny McGuire, were working on that as recent as today. So going back to encapsulating each of those line items and what they're going towards, our funding request is on the operating side, so it's specifically staffing based. So it's $200,000. What we want to be able to do with that, with the existing funding that we receive, is use that so we have 2 ambulances in service 7 days a week, primarily during peak hour times. So Monday through Friday, two trucks on that overlap, 6 to 6, 6 a.m. 6 p.m., and 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then at night you have the 1 truck on because our call volume goes down at night, so we're comfortable with the 1 unit at night. And on the weekends, we'd have the 1 truck up for 12 hours. Then we have a 2nd truck up on what we call 10-hour power shift. I didn't do the day-by-day breakdown, but typically on the weekends, a little lighter, so we can trim that back a little bit. So the 2nd truck will be on a 10-hour power shift Saturday and Sunday, again during the day, and then we would just have the 1 truck on night on Saturday night and Sunday night. The other thing, and this is really just a sign of the times, again, we primarily, when each of the fire companies go through different phases with this, but the main reason Radnor got paid staff into the fire company originally was to help with the ambulance, and very limited need on the fire side specifically. What's basically transitioned over the last 10 years is a lot of people not being available or not having the numbers there during the day to respond effectively. So for example, I mean, two quick things. I'm fortunate that I think I have a pretty nice job. I also get to do business stuff. I do enjoy coming to these meetings, believe it or not. And I get to go on fire calls. I'm at work sometimes. So that's fun. So, but what happens, those 2 ambulance go out during the day, it could be me and then 2 new people, and that's it, and nobody else comes down. And that happens quite a bit. And that's nothing that Radnor's doing wrong necessarily. That's something that plays out in community after community. There's just not too many fire companies that are willing to say on the public record that's happening and it's a problem. So we've recognized that issue at Radnor. But on the flip side of that, that fire on Spall Road, which probably many people have heard about, right across from Notre Dame Academy, it was around like between 4 and 5 o'clock. We had over 20 people show up. We even commented, it's like, God, it just worked out. We had over 20 people, 20 volunteers show up, weekday between 4 and 5 o'clock. That was awesome. So, I mean, sometimes we get lucky and we get an awesome turnout like that. So there's, you know, each day's different. You get people that have days off, or we get a holiday, or just timing of calls. But again, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much these 2 gentlemen can do, and other people at the fire company. They're really doing a lot of work on the volunteer side. We want to see that volunteer number tick back up. We're trying to do more things to increase that volunteerism. But again, we got to have some insurance, as we refer to it, in place to make sure it's a minimum complement at the station to be able to respond, again, if there's an emergency. So that's just want to keep that moving, so I didn't want to go too fast for you, but I do appreciate
So that 200,000 is, you want to put in that gap, in that one, so it was 225, I think, and then there was a 0 below it. So you want to change those 2 lines to 425, basically. Can you go back to your page here?
So is that specifically
says-
for staffing? Is it
Correct.
fire or EMS?
It's both.
So you would hire someone that would do both?
Correct. That's what we've been doing anyway. Another thing we talked about as a board of directors, our full-time hires, we're not going to hire a single, we call it a single provider. So we won't hire a firefighter only, or an either an EMT or paramedic only. So we're trying to be a little more prudent with the dollars that we receive and how we're dispersing people.
Is that 2 employees
Yeah, it's 2 employees.
with
Yeah,
benefits?
Yeah, if they take them. I mean, the one thing we've been fortunate, cross your fingers, we've had a number of employees that have waived benefits because they've had a spouse on a different plan. So they don't receive benefits, and yeah, so you save some money in that regard. So I couldn't, or you hire someone, as you know, someone's single and they're young, they don't smoke. We try not to hire smokers, obviously, because of what we do. Or you get someone who's, you know, in their 40s and they have 5 kids and they need all your benefits. So it just depends who you get.
And so this would be a line item that you'd need every year?
Correct.
Just 3 quick questions. Call volume Radnor, call volume Tredyffrin, do they roughly parallel the contributions that we provide, or are we overpaying relative to Tredyffrin?
It's a good question, Commissioner Curley. I think there's some different ways to look at it. I mean, from municipality to municipality basis, I mean, I have a lot of exposure to obviously what I basically work with 3 townships as a volunteer on the paid side. I'd have to look at the numbers a little bit more, but I think with what Radnor does, the fact that you have the liability coverage in for Radnor, the fact that you have volunteers and the staff wrapped in with workers' comp, that is unique. Berwyn Fire Company is a separate plan for staff. Paley Fire Company is a separate plan for staff. Malvern Fire Company is a separate plan for staff. So that's something that's a feather in the cap for the township as far as that coverage goes, as well as carrying the liability. I also think the fact that the fuel coverage is in there and the fire company has a relationship it does with the township, with the public works folks, that's second to none in my opinion. And there's a lot of things that maybe don't show up in a budget as far as coordination with the public works folks that go into it. So again, I think that's second to none that you provide.
Are we paying, it sounds like Tredyffrin needs to pay more also.
Yes, I think, and that's part of what we're working on with the TE Fire Company Funding Coalition, which you're familiar with. So yeah, there's some work that needs to get done there. I mean, ultimately, the best comparison I can make is with Paley Fire Company, where they have to deal with Tredyffrin, Easttown, and Willistown, where Radnor's dealing with Radnor and Tredyffrin. Is at some point it'd be good to get some linkage between the two townships, not just on a staff-to-staff basis, but on a commissioner to supervisor basis with them, coordinating on this. Because again, as Madam President pointed out, we're not necessarily going to solve this problem this year long term. There's going to have to be a continued focus on this year over year. How are we doing with volunteers? Not just how are we doing with volunteers, because we could come in next week and say, hey, we have 80 volunteers. Well, it might look good. Well, are they trained? How active are they? Because you have a lot of companies that put impressive numbers up, but if they're not, you don't really have those guys run a ton of calls. Well, what are we really getting out of them? So you can't. Sometimes those numbers are deceiving. It's how active are the core group of people that you have. And one good thing at Radnor is we do have 10 to 15 people are really, I mean, they're really killing themselves to make this thing work.
So how does we make a $200 capital contribution? How does that result in a piece of equipment or a purchase? What's the, just in a minute or two, what?
Sure.
I would prefer to keep the money here. You know, we haven't done this. Keep the money here and have you come and say, hey, we need $600,000 for a truck. But we just give you the money and the money accumulates until you.
Yeah, what we did, and this is going way back in the time, when I started 9 years ago, it used to be where the township we had a truck due up, and this is prior to the staff administration we have currently. They said, okay, well, what do you need for the truck? And they would write the full check. That changed with the purchase of our ladder truck in 2010, where they gave us $600,000 for that. And then we did a PEMA loan for $150,000 through the state. And then we used donations from the community to help fund that truck. And then what the staff had recommended is, why don't we do $200,000 year over year? And as you pointed out, Commissioner Curley, once that's accumulated to a certain level, then we can use all of that or some of that to help pay for that engine that's due up, or ladder truck or something. So yeah, basically, you explained it perfectly. We wait till it accumulates, and
just
then
goes into, you have a capital plan, it goes into your capital plan. If we wanted to see the individual purchases, we would just look at your capital plan, and it would show the individual purchases.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and then the last question is, it sounds like if we didn't approve the increase in spending, what you would lose is 2 employees, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
Wouldn't lose anybody. You would just, these are new people.
Yes, you wouldn't.
Yeah. It's new people in a sense, but the going back to the part-time element, we would have to try to do it with part-timers, and we don't.
Yeah.
We don't currently have the numbers to support that, and I previously stated, we need some minimum full-time complement to make the system work.
So here's the hesitancy I have. Doesn't mean it's a
Yep.
no. I mean, but here's the hesitancy that we were presented with a 6-figure problem last year.
Mm-hmm.
We accepted as a board that we weren't going to solve the 6-figure problem, and we contributed to it without. We had this specific discussion of, let's solve the problem before we contribute, and we said, no, we can't. We'll just contribute, recognizing that we weren't going to solve that particular problem. And now we're presented with another multiple 6-figure request that will extend perennially. It's $200 per year, per year, per year, per year. And for me to approve that, I have to have a relatively high level of certainty, which I just don't have right now at this moment. So not committed one way or another to it at this point, but letting you know the concerns that I have.
Thank you.
One of the items that I know was a shortfall in your budget was not being able to recover specifically the ambulance fees from a lot of the student population in Radnor. And you had a presentation where you showed roughly like $70,000 for all of our schools, which was over a couple of years. It was a shortfall, amounts billed but not recouped, and either sent to the collections or not recovered. Basically, students who were out of state and others who just didn't pay the bill that wasn't part of any reimbursement directly from the universities. Now, one of the things I asked John Rice to look at was, could we make that something that we get the universities to install as a fee? Wait, I envision this: we would have a fee at every university, township, ambulance, and that would be a fee that the universities would collect, and they would have a fund then.
That's a pilot, correct?
No, it wouldn't be a pilot. This would be a separate, it's a pass-through. It would be a fund, and then the school would cover that.
Okay.
If a student never used it, they could give it back to the student, but that would be on the school's books. And I asked about doing that, and John, you were going to take a look at the legality of that, or something, or some other way that we could look at. There was nothing. There was nothing that was significant about that, however you do it. But the point is to unreimburse fees from university students and have that going directly through the universities. The universities already do pay when we go and do an ambulance call at a university. The university will reimburse us for that.
At Villanova University specifically, if it's a student, yes. We have an agreement with them for the students if they're on campus when they have a unfortunate emergency.
Right. If they're off campus or if there are other circumstances, we don't get that back.
And if it's say it's a parent, or say it's me or you were up there at a football game and we fall off the bleachers or something, crack our head open, that gets billed out to your medical or however your insurance is set up. That doesn't go through the university.
So, John, any update on that?
I'll provide you a written opinion on that.
Didn't we have a vote on that?
I think we already did
I
get
thought
that
we voted
opinion,
on it.
and it was,
It's problematic, but I'll
Yeah.
give you the reasons why in writing.
But didn't we do that?
Yes.
I thought you put forward a resolution and we voted on it.
You authorized it.
We had this kind of discussion.
Right.
And we never got anything back on that.
It's problematic. The other thing that I was trying to determine, what's the extent of that unreimbursed? Is it just the local colleges, or are there students that don't live locally but attend the university? Is it other students? There's a number there that.
Well, Eamon's number was 70,000, which was that was the nut that was unreimbursed fees that were outstanding for a combination of these for students. For the
Grady,
universities.
Eastern, Villanova, and Valley Forge Military Academy Junior College.
Right.
Or university, if I'm wrong on that.
Right. So it was to try to plug that $70,000 number. And it's not a big number, but it is a third of this number we're talking about right here.
all right, well, we need to move this along. I don't envision us taking a vote on this tonight. I think we're going to need to sit on it and work with our finance department to see how we could make this work. And if we can make it work in our budget. But thank you for coming tonight, for the presentation, and for the update, and hearing how you're doing.
Appreciate your
Good.
time.
All right, thank you. All right, the next thing we have on our agenda, we're going to move on to the next committee report, which is Public Works and Engineering, which is ordinarily Jim Higgins.
And this is out of order, right? Because we always do community development first, so we switched that this
And the
meeting for some reason.
The first item under that is the application 27S06, which is a caucus discussion of 585 County Line Road. And I believe we have the applicant in the audience. This is just a caucus discussion. We won't be taking a vote on it, and we use these discussions to go over the plans and flag any issues that should be addressed before preliminary and final.
Actually, it's the applicant's attorney and his engineer.
Okay.
So I'm Rod Fluck from Butera, Bosine, Cullen, and Brennan. I'm here for James and Allison McGuckin, and Patrick Spellman from Environmental Site Resources is here also.
Okay, welcome. Thank you for coming. So this is a subdivision request going from 3 lots to 2 lots.
That's right.
And can you just give a 30 seconds of why this is, why?
Basically a redrawing of 2 lot lines. There's 2 lots currently here. This is the current lot. There's a lot here currently, and it's a flag lot leading out to County Line Road. The goal is to go from having 1, 2, and 3 lots to having 2 lots. The pole section of the flag lot will disappear. This line will be erased, this line will be drawn, and we'll then have a lot here, a lot here, and a lot here, and this lot will be merged into this lot, so that this lot line here will disappear also. Do you have the current plan?
And what,
It's actually maybe easier to see the current plan, because then you'll see why we're doing what we're doing. So currently, we have this setup. Here's the lot, one lot of the McGuckins, our client, the second lot of the McGuckins. Here's a lot of the Schwartzmans. These two lots are bisected by this pole and the flag lot. So what's happening is this is being cut off. This lot line is disappearing. This lot line is disappearing.
Wait, who owns the big lot? Is that another McGuckins own 3, right?
Actually, Schwartzman, who owns this lot, owns the big lot. And at the end of the process, it's going to be one large lot with this lopped off of it.
Yeah.
So the outcome is going to be 2 lots where there are now 3 along County Line Road, and 3 lots where there are now 4 altogether. So it's a reduction in lots. It's a reduction in lots that'll need to be serviced on County Line Road. And it's really a rationalization of the lot layout right there, right now. So.
does it change the building capacity?
No, I don't think it does. This lot, which is a larger lot, could in theory be subdividable now, but there's no plans to do that. And the fact is that the house is actually close here, so it's just a creation of a little bit larger margin on the property, and it doesn't create any larger envelope to build in anywhere on the lot. So no, for practical purposes, it will not lead to future development, and there are no development plans.
Okay, are there any other questions from?
You said-
Yeah, go ahead, Rich. Go.
Can you say again, you said 3 to 2 and then 4 to 3?
Right.
And I looked, I thought McGuckins have 3 lots on this, right?
McGuckins do have 3, but there are only 2 at issue here. This lot, again, to use the current plan, the McGuckins own this lot, which is where their residence is. The McGuckins own this lot, which is where the residence is.
Right.
They own this lot. There's a lot separating them that's owned by their neighbors, the Schwartzmans.
Right. So the Schwartzmans own the flag lot and the big lot in the back?
Correct, yes. When this is said and done, the McGuckins will own a lot that looks like this.
Right.
The Schwartzmans, and the McGuckins will continue to own this lot. There's no change there.
Right.
The Schwartzmans will own a very large lot, which is this lot.
Plus
and
that.
The flag part of the flag lot that are merged together, yes.
Well, then the Schwartzmans are going to have a net reduction because they don't have the pole or the flag anymore.
That's correct, yes.
And so is there remuneration for that?
There is, yes. Yeah.
And so what's the general purpose for it if it's not development?
To have one continuous piece of property in the name of the McGuckins. There's no plans to develop. There is an easement across this lot serving the McGuckins property. The Schwartzmans owned the flagpole. There was an easement across it that benefited this property, so no one was happy with that situation because the land was owned by somebody who was basically interfering with, not interfering, but dividing someone else's land. At the same time, they couldn't use it freely because there was an easement across it.
So how are you going to access the Schwartzman property then? It's landlocked, so where?
No,
So
it won't be though, because this line is disappearing, so this will be merged into this lot.
So, but where do you access the big lot? Oh, off of
This lot-
Gulf Creek?
Right, that's right. This abuts Gulf Creek Road, so.
Is that flag pole a driveway now, or is it just?
No, it's nothing. It's.
What's the easement on
It could be
it?
used as lawn. There's an easement that's not being used that runs across the Schwartzman's flagpole and benefits the McGuckins property here. And it really is, it's about 50 feet long, and it goes to about here. And it's an unsatisfactory situation because the Schwartzmans have that interfering with their flagpole. Meanwhile, the McGuckins don't have the continuous piece of property that they'd like.
Right, because that was to serve that separate flag lot. And so now that goes away, we'll never have that lot. What about the Schwartzman lot? That's certainly subdividable. How big what's the total acreage now with the new Schwartzman lot?
I don't have that figure on. I don't know if adding this will add another buildable lot to that. If so, that would have to be serviced off Gulf Creek Road rather than County Line Road. So,
what's the total acreage of the big lot when complete?
So 626,882 square feet for the total combined lot.
All right, can somebody divide that by 43,560 for me?
It's over.
It's more than 10 acres.
It's over 12 acres.
12 acres, yeah, 12 acres. So that.
But it's also going to be 12 acres as it is.
What do we have on there right now? Is that, how many?
12.8 now.
So could you divide that? So there's 12.8 acres there and.
Another 1.9.
Right. So I don't think that is actually a net increase. I'd have to do the math. I don't think that's a net increase to how many lots they can put in. Because they're losing this.
Because they're losing that piece.
Right. The only thing it changes is not the net lots buildable on the Schwartzman properties, it's how they access the roadways. They would have to, under the new plan, come out onto Gulf Creek rather than onto County Line.
I'm just trying to get a heads up of what we have next, right? So you're saying, they're just going to, what do we have on the big lot, the 14 acres?
That's the Schwartzman's home, and I think there's a pool house, something like that. It's a home and ancillary structure.
And what about the flag lot? Nothing on that?
Nothing on that, no.
So there's no plan for a development there, right? This is R1, right?
That's correct. And there is no plan for development. First of all, I represent the McGuckins rather than the Schwartzmans.
Okay.
I know the McGuckins have no plans.
Right.
I believe the Schwartzmans have no plans.
But you don't represent them?
I do not, no.
Okay.
I do also believe that there is, and I have not, I don't know if anyone has examined this closely or tested the validity of it, but my understanding is there is a deed restriction on the big lot that limits development on that lot. Now, I don't believe we have standing to enforce it. I don't know exactly who does, but there is a deed restriction out there that may provide you with the assurance that you may be looking for.
I'm not looking for a sure. I'm just looking to get understand what the concepts are, right? You know, so that's what I just don't want. I don't want to be blindsided next year, or oh, Rich, no, nothing. There's nothing planned, and then all of a sudden, oh crap,
I fully appreciate that. I guess,
14 new houses.
Yeah, but
if you're going to get 14, if you're going to do 14 houses, I'm just going to telling you right now, so we can talk about it a little bit.
The McGuckins just don't want a driveway next to their house, so that's why they want that. That's why they want that leg.
And the waivers you're requesting are, it looks like they're all in terms of your reporting on your plans.
Yeah, there's actually one additional one that was brought up by an engineer at the Planning Commission state, and that is that County Line Road is a major collector under the zoning ordinance. And this board has the ability, I don't believe it's a requirement, but they have the discretion to increase the existing right-of-way, which is 33 feet, to 80 feet based on the zoning ordinance and the status of this as a collector road. We'd ask that that be waived. Again, because there's no additional development and there's in fact one less lot that accesses County Line Road. So that's the only substantive waiver we're asking for, and then there are certain plan waivers that you're aware of, I believe.
Okay.
A couple of general questions. So Kevin Kachansky or John, I'm not sure which one. When this is presented, you look to see that the new property lines are consistent with our zoning, correct?
Yes, during the review process, all of that is taken into consideration to make sure that no nonconformities are being created.
And then once that happens, this becomes a by right activity, meaning this is a by right plan absent the waivers that they're requesting. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? All right. I think we are satisfied with what you've presented, and we'll see you when you come back for preliminary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the adoption of ordinance 2017-15, which has already been introduced, establishing rules and regulations for the management of right-of-way, requiring a permit application fee and plan for any street, driveway, or utility installation upon any portion of a township road or other public road or right-of-way. Can I have a motion to get this on the floor?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we've already discussed this at length when we introduced it. Is there anybody who wants to add any thought or comment to it at this point? Is there anybody from staff who would like to make any comment or questions? Is there anybody from the public? All right, I'll go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor of the adoption of ordinance 2017-15 say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes 4-1. Next, we have the adoption of ordinance 2017-14, adopting and approving an amendment to the Articles of Incorporation of the jointly organized municipal authority known as the Radnor Haverford Marple Sewer Authority, with the townships of Haverford and Marple, all of Delaware County, to add a provision therein extending the term of its existence for an additional 50 years from the date of the approval of the Articles of Amendment. Again, this has been introduced already, and we had some discussion when we introduced it. Is there anybody who has further discussion or
Well, I move
comment?
I move the approval.
Is there a second? Is there any other comment or debate? No? Anybody from staff? Anybody from the public? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That one passes 5-0. Next, we have an introduction of a new ordinance, 2017-11. I feel like we've seen before. Proposing an amendment to Chapter 142, Certificates of Occupancy, and Chapter 235, Sewers, to provide for the elimination of stormwater into township sanitary sewer system.
I'd like to recommend that we table this until the next meeting.
That's fine with me.
Second.
All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I'm opposed to tabling. I was going to vote against it, so.
Okay, well, we can all vote against it the next time, because I don't think it's going to get much support on this board. F, we are skipping. G, saldo application 2014-D02, which is in front of us for caucus, involving 145 King of Prussia Road, preliminary land development. This is a long ago plan that we stashed away and now is coming back before us. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm George Brosman of Kaplan Stewart. I'm representing the University of Pennsylvania Health System along with David Falcone of Saul Ewing. University of Pennsylvania Health System is the owner of the property at 145 King of Prussia
Wait, hold
Road.
on, George, before we start, can we move the table this one? This is 2.5 years old. We have 400 pages in our packet this week, and there is extensive amount of review that none of us have the time to go through. 2.5 years ago, I would move to table this.
Is there a second? The motion fails for a lack of a second.
I'll second it because I'd
Okay.
like to touch on the PLO in January.
Okay, so the, as I see it, what you just said is the reason why we can't table it. That this has a deadline, this has a 90-day deadline,
Right, we have until
hold on, Rich.
January,
Rich,
though.
I have the floor.
We have until January,
Just
though.
let me- So we have a 90-day deadline. The vote on this, as I see it, is going to be in January, and I think we should commit to that tonight. And what we need to do tonight is outline this as we have 90 days to review this plan. The vote will be in January, and we need to start presenting that tonight. And then secondly, what we have to do is identify that this is multiple choice. This is what we were saying for a long time. It isn't we get to decide what we want. I'd really like a national park there. What it is we get either the biomed plan or the pen med plan, and there's going to be a decision in January. So as I see it, we need to hear about it tonight, talk about it tonight, and then set a schedule for a vote.
Let's call it the by right plan and not the biomed.
All I'm saying is that we should review it at the November 27th meeting after, this came up cold. We did not know, we did not see anything from this except for in the packet starting last week, 2.5-year-old plan. So to refamiliarize ourselves with it, I think that this 40-page plan with multiple conditions, many issues, and 100 pages plus of materials from 2013, 14, and 15 would necessitate some additional time.
Is there any other comment on the motion to table? Is there any staff comment, public comment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion fails 2-3. All right.
So as I was saying, as you all know, University of Pennsylvania Health System has an existing facility in the PLO district in the township. The plan that is before you this evening was extensively reviewed by the township and its consultants in 2014 and 2015. Given that the previous extensive reviews, I'm going to provide just a brief overview of the background this evening. So by way of background, the pending plan now consists of approximately 475,000 square feet of an office building complex. It had been reduced from over 530,000 square feet. The plan proposes a series of 3 building groups as shown on the plan sets. The plan was reviewed and recommended for approval by both the Radnor Township Planning Commission and the Delaware County Planning Commission. Back in 2015, they both recommended approval. During that process, determinations were made that the revised plans complied with the applicable zoning ordinance requirements. The plan actually underwent a caucus review previously, and a draft approval resolution had been prepared, and I believe that is in the packet. Subsequent to that, I believe I have the date correct, on May 29, 2015, University of Pennsylvania Health System purchased the property to provide a location for a new state-of-the-art facility here in the township. They purchased the property subject to this pending plan, but at that time they put that plan on hold to attempt to develop what they believed would be a better plan, which would be facilitated by amendments to the PLO district to promote a mixed use over a single-use office plan that is before you. Because that process is still ongoing, now over 2 years since their purchase, University of Pennsylvania Health System notified the township that it intends to proceed to meet its needs through this all-office plan. I believe the matter is ripe for action at an upcoming board meeting, given this prior extensive review and the fact that the resolution is prepared.
Can I ask you, is the land development plan that was submitted under the mixed-use zoning scenario, has that been withdrawn, or are these simultaneously pending?
I'd have to have Mr. Falcone answer that question.
I don't believe it's been withdrawn.
No.
I think it's still alive.
Elaine, and what we did was we were scheduled to appear in front of the Planning Commission in front of your shade tree, but when the PLO ordinance was kind of stalled, we put that plan on ice. It hasn't been withdrawn. It's just been pulled from the agenda pending further discussion. In the event that the PLO ordinance gets passed, we would ramp that back up again and pursue that plan. Obviously, as the last meeting, I represented to you the timeline that the trustees are under. So at that same last meeting, we submitted the letter asking that this plan be put back on the agenda and turn the 90-day clock on.
So the 90-day clock is running on that?
No, it's running on
this.
the by right plan.
by right.
The plan that we submitted the application for under the PLO is just on hold at this point,
Okay.
pending resolution, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. Would anybody like to make comments or have
Yeah,
questions?
well,
or-
why don't you guys walk through the plans? No? You're not going to put any plans on the draw? We have them in the packet here. You're not going to?
Yeah, we were not going to do that at this time since they had been extensively presented and reviewed previously.
So my sense is, John and Kevin, we can send this, we have a deadline, the deadline's in January. What's the deadline date, John? January 16th, something like that? And between now and then, we could have as little or as much review as we want. It's pure discretionary. So my sense is what we do is we send this to the Planning Commission, we let them review it in December with no, I mean, just so it's a sort of like a public vetting of it again, and then it comes back to our board in January for a decision.
And I don't believe it would have to go back to the Planning Commission. It already has. a
Yes, it doesn't have to, but I think we want to, use our discretionary authority to use the full 90 days, and we need to vet the project again publicly. So I would say it's more, there would be no vote taken at it, or no binding vote. I guess that would be it, correct? Meaning if,
Planning Commission already made a recommendation, they can revisit that. It's the same plan from 2015. You know, if
we
you-
need to get it out into the public, though, is what I'm saying. So we need to set the date that we have to have it before us, and then we need to let the public, whether it's, I don't think it's this board that needs to.
Well, you could do a committee meeting, but, you know, both planning commissions have made their recommendations. I went back and looked at the resolution. It's pretty detailed. The road improvements are spelled out in there. This resolution went round and round and back and forth with all the consultants, and there was a lot of detail put into it. There's traffic adaptives, signal requirements,
Yeah.
all those road improvements are in this.
So then probably best to have that presentation in December at our board, essentially just
Sure.
another,
Yeah.
like a hearing, another vetting of this project. And then we have a deadline in January, and we'll have a vote in January.
Yeah, I think that Don makes a very legitimate point. It's 2.5 years since anyone's looked at this. The Planning Commission is composed of different people, different president. This is old and stale. It needs to be revamped and needs to be reviewed again. I would say this is not a by right plan. And Don's view of put it back before the Planning Commission is very, very reasonable. Very reasonable indeed.
Well, it would be old and stale if we'd had any changes to our zoning ordinance, but we haven't.
Well,
And I would hesitate to commit the resources of using, which were significant in terms of our consultants and engineers in reassessing this.
Yeah, I'm inclined to just bring it to our board and have a presentation on the details of it.
Just in front of this
And
board.
then some questions about the waiver requirements. They make it not by right, meaning that we would have to grant that. Now, the point I want to make is that the waiver requirements are, so if we choose to not allow you to use gore markings in lieu of concrete curb, my sense is you'll just use concrete curb. So,
Yeah, all of those waivers are very minor technical things that the township has
Right.
routinely granted, and things, quite frankly, I'm looking at it, were proposed for a better plan, but
Yeah.
if those waivers weren't granted, they could be complied with, and the
So
plan
my
would
my
proceed.
point is that if we said, no, we're not going to give you those waivers, you'd probably just say, thank you very much, and we'll get concrete curb instead of painted gore marking curb.
Right, and for example, one of the waivers was to preserve more vegetation and street trees, so if
Yeah.
that wasn't granted, there'd be less vegetation and less trees, which wouldn't be good, but it could be complied with.
So largely, I see this as a by right plan. At least that's what our staff is telling us. That's what the resolution is telling us. A by right plan with 5 minor waivers that are not material to the overall outcome. So as I see it, we take 90 days, we take the full amount. You've got to give us that last day in January, we have a vote, and then we set up, might as well do it, you could do it in January if you wanted. You could have the hearing in January. There's no reason to, doesn't have to be in December.
That's true. And I would
It's up
say,
to the board, as long as you meet the, the time clock when you vote on it.
and my view is that I have significant issues with the plan. I disagree with the parking structure that they have constructed. They have 1,350 spaces underground in the structure, which doesn't comport with our requirement to remove otherwise allowable surface parking. No. I also think that all that massive underground parking is impractical and illogical in this location. The stormwater there's not been any stormwater infiltration completed. There's not been any stormwater testing. There's also a right-of-way that's required to be obtained either from the school district or from PennDOT. That's not completed. All the drawings, every drawing needs to be changed to show the new owner and to be completely reflect the change in ownership. The traffic studies are very old. The traffic studies that are in there are 3 years old plus, and also our folks are not showing that it shows the reduction that they claim. And bigger issue, there's the inclusion of the PennDOT right-of-way in the green space calculation. That's improper. That green space is not part of the plan. We should be working off of the 19-acre plan, not the 27-acre. Finally, there's also the Delcora permit is long expired. There's many issues. Don points it out. We need to go through the scrubbing.
Delcora permit did not expire.
Okay, it shows in there it expired in 2014. We need to get an update and figure out where exactly it is.
I think we're all in agreement, though, that we're going to take the full amount of time.
Yeah, I think so.
There's nobody that disagrees with that, right?
Right, and those are the issues I see.
Right.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is you have 90 days to resolve those issues and cast a vote. But my sense is it's coming to a vote in 90 days, right?
I think that's right. I also think if I could just take a second to give some color on why this is here and why it's here now. So when the trustees acquired this property, this plan was ready. The resolution was there, and it was very timely at that point. But after discussions with the township, with this board, we were convinced that pursuing an amendment to your PLO would generate a better plan for the township. We bought into that. We became a part of that process, and we put this on hold in hopes that that process would see its way to a fruitful ending for us and for the other owners in the PLO. Unfortunately, that's kind of run its course. You know better than most, Commissioner Booker. At the last meeting, that kind of died. So we're here because eventually, we've been saying it, something's going to happen there. It's not going to be a park. So this plan was ready. It was vetted. And you'll have your 90 days now. But the MPC has a clock. We started it. We still believe the better plan is the PLO plan, the amendment. We think that's a better use of the property. But eventually, it's going to have to be developed. And so we're here saying you've got now 2 options. It's totally up to you. I mean, you're the elected officials. You guys are the decision makers. We can't make that the decision for you. We can just give you the 2 options that we're presenting. Whatever you like better, you can go for.
But again, Dave, it's not a by right plan. It's not either or. There's many alternatives in between.
Commissioner Booker, we are the owner of the property.
Dave, Penn does not want to build this plan, do they? They don't want to build this plan.
We submitted the plan, Rich. It's there.
Yeah, and I would say
prefer
you don't want to build
other.
this plan.
We
So
prefer
you're
one over
using
the
this as a
other,
cudgel.
and so do you. But you've got to make your decision.
My sense is it doesn't, I mean, you'll have the chance to vote against it. You'll have the chance to.
That's right.
So we've had the debate. There's just no more debating. It's time to vote.
Right.
So the vote's going to happen in 90 days. If we don't take the vote, it passes through a provision of a, I don't know the name of it, but it becomes.
Deemed approved.
Yes, if we don't, so we have an obligation to vote. It's in our best interest to take the full 90 days. That puts us into January. The only decision for us is whether we bring it before our board in December or bring it before the 18 board. Probably prudent to let it come before the 18 board because they're ultimately going to be the one making the
Well,
decision.
at the very least, we should wait till the 7th ward person is in the seat.
Yeah, so.
January 11th is your dead.
And
drop
our
dead
first
date.
meeting is when?
Well, the reorg meeting would be the January 2nd, would be the reorg meeting. You would have a meeting, the second Monday in January is the 8th.
Okay, so as I see it, this is on the agenda for the 8th. And then what we will have to decide is whether we want to have a meeting in December, which is a presentation, or whether we want that presentation to occur on January 8th also.
Okay, I think that.
Just one final thought. Bear in mind as to some of the issues raised, this is a preliminary plan. So it's recognized under the law that many final details are left to final plan approval. It's the township's obligation to grant a preliminary approval, conditioned on complying with things that would be required for a final plan.
So then it would come back before the 2018 board for another iteration,
As a
a
final
final iteration.
Okay, thank you very much for
Was there
coming
anybody
out.
from the school district here that, oh, wait. Attorney Cornelia, would you like to say something?
Nick Cornelia. I'm representing the Radnor Township School District on this matter now. This is the first time the school district's entered an appearance, expressed anything in this regards. We're obviously a major stakeholder in this process for two reasons. One, the location of the high school and location of the elementary school and the concern regarding traffic. But secondly, that's really not a land development issue, is the tax revenues that would evolve from this development. The school district wants this property developed. We also do not think this is the best plan. There's been argument previously for years and years and years that this is a by right plan. I argued in favor of the by right plan. In my opinion, it is a by right plan. But it is not the best plan for the township, for the school district, or even for the residents that are most affected. And the big concern with the school district is that if Penn goes in and develops 474,000 square feet of medical office buildings, they have every right to apply for a tax exemption for that entire site. And we're going to be without any tax revenues as a result of this. I think there's an alternative before you right now that perhaps is a better alternative that you'll be discussing later on this evening.
Nick, don't be so cryptic. Like so tell us exactly. So what I'm hearing you say without expressly indicating it is that the school district believes that the Penn Medicine proposal is better than the biomed proposal.
It's not a biomed proposal. It's the by right proposal.
I think
PLO
biomed is a
ordinance. Basically the biomed or the by right proposal is a land development issue that this board is going to sort out. As I stated, the school district's concern with that proposal is not so much the land development rights, but the tax revenues that could possibly not be generated as a result. One thing the school district does agree with are the massive traffic improvements that are being proposed by that plan. And we would like to see those traffic improvements incorporated in any plan for that site as well. But there is an alternative before this board this evening regarding the PLO ordinance. We do have some issues regarding that ordinance that we'll discuss when the time is to discuss it this evening. But in effect, the school district would be in favor of at least advertising that ordinance so that we can move it forward for further discussion. We feel that ordinance will take care of the situation regarding tax revenues, provided Penn agrees to formalize the what they have agreed to regarding not declaring it as tax exempt. We feel that it has to be discussed, traffic improvements have to be discussed, and certainly the preliminary plan, which I was not aware is actually before this township, but is before this township, would have to be discussed as well. But in effect, my direction from the school board is they want this site developed. They don't think the 474,000 square foot plan is the best plan for everyone involved, but they would be in favor of moving forward with some sort of PLO ordinance that's been before this board for 6 years now. You know, I was involved in this. It's been 6 years that we've been discussing this ordinance. It's time to move on it one way or another.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for appearing for the school district. All right, I think that concludes our caucus discussion.
Madam President?
Yes?
If I may, I'd just like to thank Nick for those comments. I agree that I think with the comments that Commissioner Curley has made, my hope would be that the motion to advertise the ordinance 2016-13 will move. I think last time it should have been approved. Not sure why it didn't. But again, too, that property is set dormant. Just as the ifs, whats, we can have a space station crash down here on, you know, on the property across the street at any time. That's an opportunity too as well. Just like, you know, Penn Medicine can also, you know, apply for tax abatement, but they made the commitment, and I agree with what Nick had said. Commissioner Curley has said previously, you know, that needs to be tied up to make sure it addresses the school board's concerns, the township's concerns, you know, on these. I think that's an agreement there. I think that's good because we have delayed, we've done nothing. There's been so much bad information, bad information. We have probably had 6 traffic studies done on this by different individuals that have all come up with the same conclusion. To continue to spend taxpayers' money on studies and studies and studies on the same thing would seem to be a waste of taxpayer money on this at all. Again, the property continues to deteriorate. It generates nothing, and also, too, it continues, by the more we continue on with this, it continues to reinforce that we are business unfriendly. We don't know what we're doing, and we continue, again, to give a black eye to the township on how we do development the appropriate way. So I'd ask the board to consider favorably moving on item H.
Okay, thank you. So that does bring us to item H under community development, which Commissioner Curley chairs, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Curley to take over now.
Okay, I'll move that I motion that we authorize advertising adoption ordinance 2016-13 at the November 27, 2017 Board of Commissioners meeting. Do I have to read the whole thing, John, or do you get, I want to move forward with item H.
Right, to
Second.
authorize it to be advertised for
Yes.
27th.
So it'll be advertised on the 27th, the next meeting.
Correct.
So that'll be a hearing date, essentially setting the hearing date on the 27th.
Yes. Yeah.
Wait, what are you talking about? Why would there be a hearing date on the 27th?
Because it's just been a motion to authorize it to be advertised. When you advertise a zoning ordinance, you advertise it for a hearing.
30 days? Not 30 days?
No, no. There's got to be 2 advertisements between tonight and November 27th. So
where does that put us for adoption?
I'd like to stick with the original adoption date of the 12th. That was the, I thought we had all agreed on the 12th as the adoption date. December 12th? Yeah, or I don't know if it's the 12th, the first meeting in December, whatever, 11th. Okay, so the first meeting in December, we have a vote on this one way or another, and it cuts one way or another. We either take our chances with the, I call it the biomed plan, or we take our chances with the Penn Medicine plan.
yeah, well, then it's going to have to be advertised for December 12th.
Okay.
Well, wait. The vote to pass PLO is just about the ordinance. We're not actually,
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
the
it's
ordinance.
just the ordinance.
Yeah, so I thought, my understanding is we have a hearing date, and we have to advertise the hearing date.
Right,
And then,
but you could adopt it that same night.
yes, I would prefer to adopt it on the 12th. That was what we had,
Well, then
11th, excuse me.
Because I don't think you're going to have sufficient time. Well, if you want to advertise it for the 27th, advertise it just for a public discussion, not a hearing. To advertise it, to adopt it, you're going to need more time you're going to have to go to December 12th.
I think that's what, so
Yeah.
Commissioner Curley's saying he would take the 11th, which is, I believe, the night of that first meeting in December, and he'd like
Okay.
to have the hearing and
So-
the adoption
So let's
the same
do the
night.
hearing and the adoption on the same night.
Do it on the same night.
Okay.
Do it on the same night. It could be tabled and continued, but most of these ordinances that you adopt, we get it advertised for a hearing one night, and you then act on it after the hearing.
Okay, so if the motion is that I motion that we advertise the PLO amendment for the first meeting in December and proceed with a vote on the amendment on that evening, that's sufficient to,
Yes.
for you to proceed?
Right.
And Dave Falcone, that's appropriate?
We think that's actually a good timeline, because certainly if the ordinance passes on that date, it saves a lot of brain damage on the by right plan. We would
And we'll
then-
have somebody in the seventh seat.
Right. We would then be able to re-energize the PLO plan, and that would take precedent, and then the new board
Yeah.
would act on that plan.
So December 11th.
Okay, and then what we would need in the interim is we would need you to make sure that we're comfortable with the tax issue. So you have to convince him, and then you'd have to report back to us, because we became comfortable with the tax issue, the thing went away, so now we have to make sure we're comfortable with the tax issue.
Yeah, I think it's all still in place. The letters are still there, and it's tied to the.
And then I would be obviously more comfortable if Nick was comfortable with the tax issue
They
also.
got the same letters. We've issued
Okay.
the same commitments to the school district.
I do feel that should be more formalized, though, than just that letter.
There'll be another writing
Yeah.
beyond.
Yeah.
We've agreed to a condition as part of
Yeah.
the plan approval.
Yeah, and we would also, we would prefer that being in writing prior to the adoption of the PLO.
Yes.
Okay.
It would have to be by December 11th. Right.
All right, so it sounds to me like we have agreement on the mechanism going forward if it carries the vote tonight.
And I've seconded it. Is there any other comment from this board?
Yes.
Any comment?
Go ahead.
Mine is just that it's the same position as I did last meeting, which is we have two commissioners here who are going to have to deal with this for however long they're going to have to deal with this, who need to vote on it. And we have a vacant seat. We have one who's conflicted out. So, I know of 3 people here who are going to be dealing with the ramifications of the zoning change. 2 are not up here yet. 1 is vacant. So that's half of the board. That's half of the people who are going to have to vote on the ramifications of the zoning change. I voted for it all along. I think it is better. I think it is better than the by right plan. I agree, but it's not just 145. It's 7 total properties. So that's why I want to say, I think we should do it the first meeting in January and let the 2 new commissioners vote on it. Then we'll have a Ward 7 commissioner as well. And it's something that will run in line with the by right plan as well. So we're already into January for that. Why wouldn't we go into January on this as well? And I would hope this would carry the day, because I agree, this is better.
Again, this affects many more than just, this is not a Penn PLO zoning amendment. This is a zoning amendment for 7 properties. This is a zoning amendment that we haven't looked at and vetted. It has been reviewed by us. The comments from both the county and the Radnor Planning Commission have not been addressed. They have not made any changes to what was originally proposed more than a year ago. If this is a good idea, then it will carry the day with the new board, but it should not be brought to the fore and approved as this board disbands. It's not appropriate, and I agree with Luke.
Any other comment from the commissioners? Any staff comment? Any public comment?
Just to go for it also, obviously, there was 3 issues that we're concerned about in the PLO district. One, as we mentioned, is formalization of the taxing issue. The school district would also like to see, simultaneous with approval, that the land development plan be also approved. I have not seen the land development plan. I have some comments about what it involves. It doesn't appear to be anything that the school district would have opposition to, but they would also want those traffic improvements to be included in the land development plan. We think those traffic improvements are very important to the whole site and to the development of King of Prussia Road. Thirdly, I'm not really certain why, but I know years ago when this first started, the amendment was limited to those properties to the south side of the R5 Amtrak Railroad. Now I know it's been expanded to include the whole area. I'm not really certain why it was expanded to include the whole area, because it did include several properties that are on the south. It didn't just include the current Penn site, it included other properties as well. So, we're not really certain why it was expanded to include all of them, and, perhaps that could, Don or John or someone can fill us in on why it included the entire PLO.
It's the whole PLO district. I mean, the PLO as it exists now, this proposed ordinance essentially adds, it's not rezoning any property, it adds use regulations, additional options of development, additional types of development. So,
And it only involves 3 properties because the minimum lot size is 10 acres, and you have to have the minimum lot size. 4 of the 7 are above the minimum, below the minimum lot size. So they get the limited capability to add, I think, 2 additional uses, and that's it. They get no dimensional relief, no setback differences. So the mechanism that you're referring to was largely achieved, the outcome was largely achieved just with a different mechanism.
And so to the north side of the tracks, is there only one property
Yes.
that is over 10 acres?
Yes.
So what you said is correct. It affects all 7. It changes all 7. And that is a variance. There's a variety of reasons for it, and we haven't vetted exactly why and what the benefits or detriments to that are. And that's part of what we're talking about. So I agree with Nick. Land development plan, all of the documentation, not what Penn said, which is, oh, as soon as you give us the change in law, then we'll show you the deal. We need the entire deal up front. We need to understand all the ramifications, all the commitments, and exactly how the enforcement mechanisms would work, and then talk about the other sites. So there's a lot to do, and so that's what we're talking about.
Now, I would like to see that land development plan placed on the Planning Commission for December, the first meeting in December, so we can start moving it forward. I don't know if that's an issue or not.
Well, so, Nick, the plan was submitted. We were supposed to be on the agenda last month. But as far as the trustees go, where there's no PLO amendment, and it kind of died on the vine there, we see no reason to expend resources to pursue a plan that would not be viable without the amended PLO. So the plan that we submitted was the one that was submitted basically as sketch plan of the Planning Commission a while back, and it basically falls as a by right plan. But we have it, happy to share it with the school district, but we won't pursue that path as long as the amendment is not a viable option.
David, it's my understanding it was your original intent. Originally, you were pursuing that path.
Oh, that was the intent.
That path was circumvented by the vote we took.
That's exactly correct.
Last,
We were actually scheduled, Don, for all of our meetings. 2 in the Planning Commission, we had 1 at the Shade Tree, and they were all tabled as when that ordinance went down, when the advertising for the hearing went down. And that's when this, the by right plan came back.
So if this board does agree to advertise, would Penn then at least pursue the plan with the Planning Commission and normal process?
We will, yeah. So that plan is tied, obviously, to the ordinance. If the ordinance doesn't change, that plan is not a viable option. So we are really at the mercy of this board as to whether or not that becomes a plan we can consider.
All right, is there any other public comment? I'll call the vote. All those in favor of Don Curley's motion to authorize to advertise for the adoption, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2.
Explain to us, John Rice, what that means with a 3-2 vote. Does it happen or not happen?
The way the charter reads, this came up after the last meeting from some members of the audience. Under the adoption procedure in the charter, 3.03B, it says, when approved initially by a majority vote of the board members present, you got to have a quorum. The township secretary then causes the ordinance to be posted, and then it gets advertised. So just to advertise it, you need a majority of the members present, which you have 3, which is a majority of 5. To adopt it, you're going to need a 4th vote. To actually adopt it, you need 4 out of the members present for the 7 board members, if there's 7 sitting up there when this comes up. So it moves forward in terms of the advertisement. You still need to have 4 votes to actually adopt it.
Okay, great.
Wait, that can't be right, John, because that would have should have gone last time then.
No, Jim was here. There were 6
There were
sitting.
6 commissioners present. 1 was conflicted, but you needed 4 with 6 present.
All right, let's move on to the next item.
That's unbelievable. All right, so everybody, listen to what happened right there. So Jim, why is Jim not here today? I never heard why he's not here. So Jim,
I heard why he's not here. It's a deeply personal reason.
It's very personal.
And I would just ask you not to criticize Jim's reason for not being here.
Well, I think the fix was in on that.
Everyone in Radnor would grant him
So I think you should
grant
be
him the
careful,
excuse.
Commissioner Booker,
Yeah.
what you're accusing Commissioner
Okay,
Higgins
so
of.
just
be aware.
There are reasons why, and
it's
deeply
tremendous-
troubling that we would criticize Jim, given the circumstances.
it's a tremendous coincidence that happened to work like that. Just a tremendous coincidence.
All right, let's move
Madam
on
President,
from
I would
this
just
sort of
say- I would
really
just say-
inappropriate speculation. I think we should move on.
Madam President, I would just say I received a message from Commissioner Higgins, and I would just say that comment's very inappropriate.
Okay, let's move on. We don't need to hear any more of that.
It's not.
Don, the next item.
Yeah, Rich, do you want to take that, explain your logic behind item I? We can decide on it. Rich?
The issue with
Commissioner Booker proposes to amend, so just tell us.
Commissioner Booker proposes to amend the PLO to exclude medical offices from the PLO. This whole PLO is predicated on a straw man argument. The argument is medical offices have the most traffic. Penn will develop however the maximum amount of office space they can, medical office, and generate the maximum traffic. And what they're proposing will generate slightly less. So if the issue is medical offices, let's prohibit medical offices going forward. Medical offices, my view is, are prohibited from the PLO today. The history of it is that they are prohibited, and there's no provisions for medical offices. Medical offices are provided for in other areas of zoning. So this would alleviate the concern that is the issue that's driving this. No medical offices. We would have what the by right plan, for instance, for 145 King Prussia Road is 267,000 square feet of general office or lab. So that's what we would get. That's what this would do, would make it clear of what the already stated law is, which is no medical offices. So that's what this motion is.
Okay, John, Solicitor Rice, would you like to comment on whether this is appropriate, whether this is legal, whether this is your opinion?
Well, it's a proposed zoning amendment, and if you support to exclude medical dental offices, what you would do is you wouldn't put it in this section. You'd put it in the section that says office. There's 2 uses currently in the PLO. One is scientific industrial research, testing, or experimental laboratory. So that's that use. And then underneath it, it says office. So if you wanted to exclude medical, dental, you would say offices except for medical and dental. So if you want to move that forward, then you should authorize the staff to draft a zoning amendment to that effect, because then that has to go to the Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission. They comment on it, and then it comes back to this board for a vote up or down. So that's about a 30 or 45-day timeline to do that.
And would that have any effect, John, on the things currently in front of us?
No, any land developments that are filed, formally filed, are grandfathered in. It wouldn't touch either of these projects that we've been talking about tonight, either the 2015 by right plan or the current Penn Med plan. It wouldn't affect it as long as those plans were alive, which they are.
Okay, so
They're grandfathered
two
in.
quick reactions. One of the reasons why I support the amendment is that the amendment caps medical and dental. So we addressed this in the amendment, and we put a, not 100% cap, which is, it sounds like this is proposing, but a sizable cap. I think it's something on the order of 66%, something like that. So we did address this, and I believe that it's addressed appropriately. I am not sure if this is a good idea or a bad idea, and I feel like I'm kind of using the same logic that you used a moment ago. If this is a good idea, then bring it up to the 18 board, because this is starting new. The amendment is 5 years in the making. I'm ready to make a decision. This one is 2 days in the making. I don't know if it's good or bad. So as I see it, if you want to pursue this through the 18 board and have them vote on it. At this point, it's not clear to me if it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Several years ago, the Planning Commission had recommended to us that we change the ordinance, accomplish this goal by changing the number of parking spaces required for medical dental. And that seems to me to be a better way to go, because that's a good location for those uses.
Right, I would say the issue that the Planning Commission identified a year ago was the stress, the traffic and parking stress that medical office brought, not the actual use itself being, inappropriate or undesirable. In my opinion, it's quite the contrary. This use is actually quite appropriate and quite desirable for the reasons that we've heard from some of our residents tonight, that, having top quality health care available to our residents here without going to Philly is a good thing. However, medical space does have these ancillary disadvantages of creating more traffic and having more cars. So if that's the issue we want to address it through directly addressing those issues, the parking and the stress on our streets. So if we did, I won't be on the next board, but if this board does decide to move forward with some sort of alteration of how our zoning treats medical office, which may be a good idea, don't say no medical office. We want medical office, in my opinion, in our PLO district, but treat it in a way that will minimize the negative effects through parking and conditions that help us with our traffic. That would be my opinion. Anyone else?
Well, again, the PLO zoning amendment that you advertised will provide for medical office with no adjustment to the parking, which is antithetical to the Planning Commission recommendation. So it's inconsistent, what you're saying. It's for purposes of what you want to do, ignore it. For purposes of what I want to do, give it to the Planning Commission. It's just the hypocrisy of it is what is the sentiment that I see. Nonetheless, medical office is the problem with the PLO and the traffic. That is what we're addressing with this zoning amendment.
Any other comment? All right, was there a motion made?
Yes, there was.
Was it seconded? All right, is there a second for the motion? All right, it fails for the lack of a second, and we will move on to Personnel and Administration, which was a committee chaired by Commissioner R., so I will take this. This is, I will go ahead and move to pass Resolution 2017-129, exercising our municipal option to prohibit the location of a Category 4 licensed slot machine facility within Radnor Township pursuant to Act 42 of 2017. John Rice, you want to give us the quick down and dirty on this?
Well, I'll second the.
Second it.
Yeah, as it's been in the newspaper pretty extensively over the last 2 or 3 weeks, the new legislation that provides for 10 mini casinos. There's some regulations subject to that, but mini casinos can go anywhere provided they're not within 20 miles of an existing casino, unless that existing casino wants to have a mini casino within 20 miles of their present facility. So municipalities that are in, and I haven't looked at the map in terms of where Radnor sits. Are you within 20 miles of King of Prussia?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so they theoretically could have a mini casino in Radnor Township. Nobody else could, but they theoretically could. So the law provided for a municipal opt-out, and the resolution that's in front of you lets that known to the State Gaming Board. It has to be delivered to them by the end of the year to exclude any of these mini casinos. So that's what it is. We've been drafting several of these for several municipalities, and I think there's a county option too, and I don't know that Delaware County's done anything on this.
So, John, this is only as binding as the day that commissioners decide to undo it, right? It's a resolution. It can be undone at any time by any board.
You could revoke it, sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
if you want to go through that process, but
Well, I just, I don't think we want casinos. I think it's, I'm troubled by this idea that more gambling is good for society. So, obviously, voting for it is taking the position against the casino. I'm just troubled by the trend and think that we need more leverage in this, and this is the only leverage they've given us, which apparently is not that much, as I see it.
But, I mean, and the state can always change the law, too, down the road. I mean, you can't control what the state is going to do. I'm guessing that the 10 licenses will be sold relatively quickly. So somewhere down the road, I mean, if some board here wants to revoke this resolution, there may or may not be any licenses available. I mean, it's hard to predict. Maybe they'll be shopped around like liquor licenses 30 or 40 years from now. I don't know. But this is what the law calls for. It's a resolution, and it's got to be delivered by the end of the year.
Okay.
All right, there was a second motion and a second. Any debate on this board? Any staff debate? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, there's Superintendent Calarula. Do you have anything for public safety? Library? Public health?
No report.
Parks and Recreation?
No report.
Any old business? Any new business?
I have one thing I want to bring up that we can discuss in the future. Conversations with some of the merchants over the time in Wayne about, especially businesses like the Dunkin' Donuts or the cheese shop, those places that where somebody's just going in to grab a cup of coffee. And we don't have the accommodation that Lower Merion has, where you can push a button on the meter and pick up an extra 10 minutes. I think we should consider formalizing a policy that maybe before 10 o'clock in the morning, because most of the spaces are open, that somebody wants to pull up, run in. Some mechanism they've used in the past was four-way flashers on, and run in and get your cup of coffee and your donut without having to deal with the meters or the kiosks. So some future meeting, I'd like to have that.
My sense is we would just have to pass an ordinance, right? You can't have a policy.
Right.
You can't have a resolution that passes a flasher policy that's contrary to an ordinance. So if we decided to do that, we would pass an ordinance. We would change the time to 10 o'clock.
And
Yeah.
Commissioner Curley, I was just mentioning that we had that special
Yeah.
meeting about
Yeah,
a
we
year and
did
a
that.
half ago, and that
Yeah.
would be probably be the best solution to this problem.
Yeah. And I can tell you anecdotally, I'm there a lot. There's nobody there there's no parking issue. The logic of pay for park is to control spaces and create turnover. And there is no need to control spaces and create turnover at 10 o'clock. I see the point of it. I've had $25 cups of coffee, so I'll support it, and maybe you and I will work together, and we'll bring it before the board.
There's also another new business item on here. I don't know who put that on there. So whoever did can own it right now. Request for consideration to set special meeting date. Was that you, Bob?
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to give the board the opportunity, if you wanted to meet, to further discuss the sewer fund and the park and open space fund, since we did not get to that this evening, or if you want us to
Can we
take
put
the
it on the next
information-
agenda?
We can do that.
I'd rather do it as part of the regular agenda.
We can do that.
Okay. All right. Anything else under new business? Any public participation?
I had a couple of questions. Hi, Kelly Martin, 7th
Welcome.
Ward. I was wondering if you'll still vote on the Penn Biomed if there's not a 7th Ward person, because I know you'll all have to vote on that commissioner next week, or the temporary commissioner. So I
The way
don't
the
know.
schedule's set up, we should have the 7th commissioner seated by then.
Okay, as
That
long
will
as
be
there's a
on the
vote.
11th, and we should be voting on it the 11th.
So we should be
So
represented.
we'd
I
vote
guess.
on that in the beginning of the meeting, and then the business of the meeting would come after.
Well, we might not. We might not have representation at that point. We have till the 6th and then another 15 days, so that could be beyond the 11th.
It's going to be on the 11th.
Okay, so I would hope that the 7th Ward would have representation at that point. It's been a few months now that we don't. So I'd like to ask for that. On an entirely separate note, I was looking for where the map is of the Adrossan property that Radnor Township owns. And I couldn't find that on the website, and I was wondering if that.
The address of what property?
Like the property on Adrossan that Radnor purchased.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to know where we can park, so we can use that if we want to go and have a picnic or something like that. So if that can be posted on the website, I'd love that, because we'd
Pretty
really
sure
like
it's
to
in,
use-
maybe if you could contact Jennifer DiStefano, and she'll guide you through how to find it.
Perfect, okay, great. And then another question I wanted to know, I'd asked in the last time I was at a meeting, but about the document, the confidential document that was released, that was used in the filing, I guess, against Mr. Booker. I haven't heard anything about that yet, about if anyone's going to discuss. That night it was voted to send his ethics argument. I'm not thinking of the right word, but anyway, to
We have, there's 3 separate lawyers now working on that. John Rice, Stephen Harris, and my counsel now. So I am hopeful that we will find out who it was that colluded from our either ethics board or administration with the Radnor Democratic Committee to file a false and baseless claim, a politically based claim.
We directed our solicitor to take 30 days, which would mean the second meeting in, I think it would be the second meeting. If it wouldn't be the second meeting in November, it would be the first meeting in December. So he has direction from us, and he has a clock, so he will report back to us his findings on the source of the breach.
John, you said something. Do you know something about this, John? Care to say anything about this?
Yeah, I think now it makes sense that you would say false and baseless, but I seem to remember reading that there were 8 different charges,
So we
of which
shouldn't-
this is
we
only
shouldn't
one.
prosecute
There's no,
this
there's,
tonight.
there's no
We should stay
charges.
silent on
No
this.
charges.
My question just merely is, during that.
Baseless allegations.
That meeting, there was, it was discussed really at great length that those documents, that if I was involved, say, in an interview, that those documents would be sealed and that that would be a confidential document. So then to see it appear the next day, I was like shocked. And I know that clearly there's somebody who can just speak up and say,
Yeah.
that was me.
So
But,
we have
it's costing, I
30-day
know.
clock on figuring that out.
Perfect, great. And then also, the other question that I've asked a number of times is about when our vile criminal Phil Eyre, when it was voted, whether or not he should be replaced as president, or that he, that we were going to remove him as president, or that you could remove him as president, that 3 people voted for it and that 3 people voted against it. And the media has said that all of you were told on September 21st exactly what the criminal charges were. And I know that
That's
we're all.
not true.
That's not true.
We-
That's
we
the
were
first
we were
answer. Okay,
told
so
we were
that's not
told
true.
of the nature of the investigation and the what they're looking for.
Okay,
And we were also told there was no mistake.
It was a sealed warrant, and everything we were told was rumor. It's a sealed warrant. No one knew
But
what
a
was in
sealed
it.
criminal warrant.
Yes, it was a criminal warrant.
Okay, and so
And
on
at the
the
minute,
9th.
and let me say that the minute the charges were made public, we took action swiftly and demanded resignation. So let there be no doubt that as soon as we knew what was in that warrant, we took the appropriate action.
But also, let there be no doubt, we knew the nature of the investigation and of the potential charges. And we knew that there was no error in this case.
And that's what it seems from reading the indictment, that everything was really laid out there.
Well,
And-
for somebody to know exactly what's in a sealed warrant, that's just not possible.
Okay, then
So-
the media, I guess, was wrong, but I appreciate you answering tonight,
Mhm.
because I had never heard an answer before
Okay.
now, but I
Is there any
appreciate
other
you answering. No,
comment?
that's all tonight, thank you.
Okay.
I
Is there any other public comment? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move that we adjourn.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.